Chapter 64. Sargeras nodded. He was also a little surprised. Over the years, many human restaurants had refused to let him eat there. Even if he was allowed to stay, he would have to eat in a section reserved for demons, which made him feel awkward as if he was an alien. To his surprise, this skinny human owner didn't seem to be afraid of him at all, and even let him sit wherever he wanted. This made him feel respected for the first time. He looked around, and then pulled out a chair and sat down at a table in the corner by the door. There weren't any customers around yet. The tempting aroma of meat made Sargeras hungrier. He looked at Meg, pointed to a Ruggiemo in a customer's hand, and said, "Boss, I'd like one of those." His voice was a little hoarse and dry, as if he hadn't drunk water for a long time. "Okay." Meg nodded, and then turned to the kitchen. "Wow, what a big bald head." Amy's eyes lit up when she saw Sargeras sit down. She slipped down from the bar stool with the little orange cat in her arms and walked to the table. She looked up at him curiously and asked, "Hello, big bald head." "I'm Amy. Are you a demon? What kind of demon are you? You don't even have a strand of hair. Are you a bald demon?" Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was lying in Amy's arms, also looked up at Sargeras curiously. It was also not afraid at all. This was the first time Sargeras had been called a big baldy to his face. As a lava troll, his temper had always been as explosive as lava. No one had dared to look down on him when he was on the Demon Islands. In Chaos City, even normal humans would avoid him when they saw him. He didn't expect this little girl to call him that. However, when he looked at Amy, the anger in his eyes faded away. This little girl is so cute. Her silver hair was braided in 2 little braids. Her face was delicate and cute, and she had a pair of small pointed ears. She looked like a half-elf. She was also holding a furry orange and white beast in her arms. Now that she was standing in front of the table, the 2 little fellows raised their heads and stared at him with their big blue eyes full of curiosity and expectation. Looking at their expressions, there wasn't the slightest bit of mockery or ridicule in their words. It should be more out of childlike curiosity. If he had met such naughty kids in the past, Sargeras would have taken out a fireball to scare them away. But this little girl was so cute that he didn't want to scare her with a fireball. Besides, she was the daughter of the owner of this restaurant. The owner had shown him respect just now, so he didn't ask such a question. But he still looked at Amy with a straight face and said, "I'm Sargeras, a powerful lava demon warrior, not a bald demon." Sa, Baldy. Amy shrugged helplessly. "But your name is so hard to pronounce. Big Bald is so easy to remember. I remember it as soon as I see you." Sargeras's eyes lit up again. If the person standing in front of him had been a man, he would have definitely challenged him to a duel. No, he would have directly cast a bursting flame spell on him to let him know the consequences of disrespecting a lava demon. But looking at Amy, who looked so conflicted and helpless, he couldn't get angry. How could he do that to such a little girl? As a demon, Sargeras was rarely soft-hearted and compassionate. Over the years, there were many humans who had died in his hands for various reasons. But now, there was a fire in his heart, and he had nowhere to vent it. After all, the little girl had tried her best. It even made him wonder if his name was really too hard to remember. "You're Laji Ruggiemo." Meg came out with a Ruggiemo and handed it to Sargeras. He patted Amy's head with a smile. He had heard most of their conversation. This little girl is so lovable and annoying. However, as a person with a hidden poisonous tongue, there was an inexplicable sense of satisfaction when he saw Amy make the customers angry and annoyed, but they could only choose to forgive her after seeing her face. It was quite refreshing. Sargeras took the Ruggiemo and turned his attention from Amy to the Ruggiemo in his hand. The steaming Ruggiemo gave off an enticing aroma, and the chopped meat was stuffed into the white biscuit that had been cut open. He had been to many places on the continent, even the capital of the Roth Empire. But this was the first time he had seen a biscuit made like this. He couldn't help but take a big bite. An unprecedented delicacy spread in his mouth, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. Every taste bud was cheering and jumping. This kind of delicacy was so special. It was completely different from the meat he had eaten in the past. After it was combined with the soft and sweet biscuit, the taste was raised to another level. It was really delicious and moved him. He wasn't a picky eater. When he was on Demon Island, he often ate raw meat. At most, he would put it in his hand and roast it. Later, he left Demon Island to find a way to become stronger. After that, he slowly started to come into contact with human food. After cooking, the texture and taste were indeed much better. But this was the first time he had eaten something as delicious as this. It was like a small torch suddenly turning into lava. It was a completely different level of taste. Meg pulled Amy back a few steps. This pork was from Demon Island. According to the system, it should have a strong effect on demons, so they had to be careful of his reaction. After Sargeras swallowed the big mouthful of Ruggiamo, it immediately turned into a stream of heat that slid down his throat. His throat suddenly felt like it was on fire, and the feeling quickly spread to his blood. His blood seemed to be boiling, like a galloping horse, crashing and slapping against each other. Flames appeared one after another, like flowers blooming on top of his blood. Whoosh! The sound of rising flames rang out. Sargeras threw his head back and let out a long howl. His closed eyes suddenly opened, and flames more than 10 centimeters long rose up from all over his body. Then the front of his clothes burst open, and the fine lines of lava on his body split open at a speed visible to the naked eye. Golden red liquid flowed slowly inside, giving off a terrifying heat like real lava. Chapter 65. Sargeras's clothes were torn off, and his body was on fire. The red lava flowing in the lava patterns raised the temperature of the restaurant. Meg was surprised to see Sargeras's reaction. If it were another succubus who ate the Ruggiamo, he couldn't imagine what would happen next. He thought he might have to put some reminders on the menu. Luckily, Sargeras's clothes were made of a special material. Although he was on fire, his clothes and cloak were not affected at all. Therefore, the embarrassing scene of his clothes being burned off didn't happen. Mag wasn't the only one who was stunned. The two customers who had just walked in were also shocked. Although the rich aroma of meat wafting toward them made them swallow involuntarily, they still chose to close the door and retreat out of the restaurant when they saw that the lava demon seemed to have entered a state of rage. What did Mr. Mac do to that lava demon? Why did he put him into battle mode? The two customers walked a few steps away. Thinking of the tempting aroma, they didn't want to leave. They couldn't help feeling worried and surprised. Lava demons were one of the most powerful demons in terms of fighting ability. They were also very destructive. A few fireballs from them could burn down a house. Mag, who had always been gentle and friendly, had somehow provoked that lava troll. If this big fellow flew into a rage, it might even raise the entire restaurant to the ground. If the owner of the restaurant was powerful or had a powerful force behind him, he wouldn't have to worry about people causing trouble. However, there was only Meg and Amy in Mamie's family. They were not at the same level as that demon in battle mode. They couldn't help but worry about whether they would be able to eat something as delicious as Yangzhou fried rice in the future. They had come early today to try the new dish. The customers in the restaurant saw Sargeras's reaction after eating the Ruggiamo. They also felt their blood boiling after eating the Ruggiamo, but it wasn't too bad. It was quite comfortable. However, he didn't expect the demon to have such a big reaction. It actually revealed its combat form. He didn't know what Mr. Mac had put in the Ruggiamo. Sargeras took 2 steps back to avoid burning the table. The blood in his body and the magma on the surface of his body were circulating faster. The chains that had not been broken for a long time seemed to have loosened a little. This feeling made his heart beat faster. Ever since he could no longer advance his strength more than 50 years ago, he had tried countless methods and almost traveled across half of the continent, but he still couldn't find a way to break through. He didn't expect that after just one bite of the Ruggiamo, he would feel like he could make a breakthrough. It was as if a spark had been ignited. He felt that as long as he continued to eat, those sparks would slowly burn into a big fire, allowing him to be reborn from the ashes and break through this layer of shackles, becoming the first lava demon to break through the shackles in 100 years. At that time, the plan that he had conceived 50 years ago could be carried out. The thing under the holy lake could also reappear in the world. This made his expression somewhat excited. "Father, our chair was burned. While everyone was holding their breaths and looking at Sargeras to see if there would be other changes in his body, Amy pointed to a pile of black ashes on the ground with her little finger. Then she looked up at Sargeras with a serious expression on her face. "Pay for it, big bald guy. Although you're a demon, I'm super fierce. I'll set you on fire." Meow. Ugly Duckling and Amy's arms also bristled. It meowed at Sargeras, but its voice sounded a little soft and cute. Sargeras, who was still immersed in the joy of loosening his shackles, was a little surprised. He looked down at the burnt chair and touched his big bald head awkwardly. However, he was in a good mood now, so he naturally didn't care about the compensation of a chair. He controlled the flames on his body, and the temperature dropped a lot. However, the cracks on his body didn't disappear, and the golden red magma could still be seen flowing slowly in them. He waved his hand and said, "I'll pay for it. But boss, give me 10 more Rigiamos." "Okay, that's what you said." Amy nodded with a hint of warning in her eyes. "Little owner, the bill, please." At this time, the small-eyed man put down the bag of Ruggiamo in his hand and stood up contentedly. He took out his money bag and said to Amy, "Ruggiamo in the morning makes me feel refreshed and energetic. It's so comfortable." 1 Ruggiamo, 3 gold coins. Amy nodded. 3 gold coins. The small-eyed man counted out 3 gold coins from his money bag and put them in Amy's hand. Then he said goodbye to Meg, walked a little farther away from Sargeras, opened the door, and walked out of the restaurant. 3. "Boss, you're selling the bread for 3 gold coins. How much do I have to pay for the chair?" Sargeras stared at Meg and unconsciously reached out to touch his money back. 3 gold coins for a bread that could loosen his shackles wasn't expensive at all in his eyes. However, he only had a dozen gold coins left in his money bag. If he added the compensation for the chair, he definitely couldn't afford 10 gold coins. The other customers in the restaurant also looked over, curious about the compensation for the chair. The style of the restaurant was very comfortable. The tables and chairs were simple, but not inferior. Instead, they had a simple style. "Yes, 3 gold coins for 1 Lagi Ruggiamo." Meg nodded with a smile. He also glanced at the ashes on the ground and asked in his mind, "System, how much is 1 chair?" "1 matching chair in the restaurant, 10 gold coins." The system answered slowly, 10 gold coins? "Do you think I'm a sucker?" Meg pursed his lips. The style of the chairs in the restaurant was simple and elegant, but 10 gold coins was a bit high. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are made from the same centuries-old tree in the depths of the wind forest. The tree rings and patterns are exactly the same, so the visual effect is very harmonious and comfortable. Now there are only 5 matching chairs left. If you want to buy them, please do so now, the system answered calmly. You're using the holy spring of elves to grow rice, and a centuries-old tree to make tables and chairs. Aren't you afraid that the elves will come to kill me one day? Meg was a little speechless, but he had to admit that the system had put in a lot of effort to improve the style of the restaurant. Using a big tree in the wind forest as a table, this should be the only restaurant in Chaos City. All the operations of the system are within the safe range. There is no danger of being discovered. Please don't underestimate the system, the system said angrily. This chair is 10 gold coins, Meg said to Sargeras with a smile, ignoring the system. 10. 3 gold coins. Sargeras looked down at the gold coins in his big hand. Chapter 66. Meg glanced at the gold coins in Sargeras' hand. There were exactly 13 gold coins. Sargeras had just asked for 10 Ruggiamos. It seemed that he didn't bring enough money today. He wanted to laugh. The customers waiting outside the door saw that the chaos they had expected didn't happen, and that a man with small eyes walked out of the restaurant with a satisfied face. It seemed that there was no problem in the restaurant. They hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. "Boss, I don't think it's very kind of you to charge me 10 gold coins for a wooden chair like this. Even if I go out to buy one, it won't cost me more than 2 gold coins. How about this? I'll charge you 4 gold coins, and I'll buy 2 Ruggiamos with the remaining 6 gold coins." Sargeras raised his voice and stared at Mag with his red eyes. He had always been too lazy to control his emotions when dealing with men. He was only talking to Meg for the sake of the Ruggiamos. Otherwise, he would be holding a big fireball in his hand right now. The two men who had just entered the restaurant saw the lava troll getting angry and hurriedly shrank back. However, they were stunned when they heard Sargeras' words. It seemed that this was another demon who had been conquered by Mr. Mac. Haggling with a human in order to eat 2 more Ruggiamos, the demon was not far from losing his dream. Even demons were willing to lower themselves for Ruggiamos. This raised their expectations. They walked a few steps into the restaurant and sat down in an empty seat, waiting for Meg to deal with the matter first. Meg wasn't intimidated by Sargeras' aura at all. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are custom-made. To enhance the visual effect, all the tables and chairs were made from the same big tree. An outsider's chair would spoil the effect, so I can't accept it. A custom-made chair like this costs 10 gold coins." This was a piece of wood obtained from the depths of the wind forest. Even a single piece of wood could be sold for a high price in the capital of the Roth Empire. Now, in order to match the overall style of the restaurant, selling it for 10 gold coins was a very reasonable price. If it weren't for the fact that the system gave him so many precious items, Meg wouldn't have said anything even if he sold it for 100 gold coins. He was just a little worried that the elves would notice that it was a holy tree, or something similar. The eyes of the customers in the restaurant lit up when they heard this. They couldn't help but lower their heads to look at the chairs they were sitting on and the tables beside them. They hadn't noticed it before, but now they realized that the tree rings on each of the tables were exactly the same. Even the stripes were the same. No wonder the tables and chairs in the restaurant looked so natural and harmonious at first glance. What was even more astonishing to everyone was that there were a total of 16 tables and 64 chairs in the restaurant, and all of them were made from the same tree. Just how massive was that tree? There was definitely no tree like that around Chaos City. Even if there was such a tree in the depths of the distant mountains, it would definitely cost a lot of money to cut it down or transport it to make tables and chairs of the same style. How could such a huge amount of money be used to make tables and chairs for the customers in the restaurant? They immediately felt that they were being respected and pampered. 3 gold coins for a Laji Ruggiamo was too expensive? No. It would be a pleasure to eat such a delicious Ruggiamo in such a restaurant. Not to mention 3 gold coins, even 6 gold coins would be a pleasure. Many people already had this feeling in their hearts. They looked at the other decorations in the restaurant. If only the tables and chairs were so exquisite, the other decorations must be even more exquisite. However, on second thought, they couldn't help but be a little more careful. After all, if anything in the restaurant was broken, they would have to pay a lot of money. Meg's words to Sargeras had inadvertently raised the style and taste of the restaurant in the hearts of the customers. Most of the customers who had the extra money to come here early in the morning to eat a Ruggiamo that cost 3 gold coins had gotten rid of the stage of working hard for a living and had started to pay attention to the taste of life. I. Sargeras' body burst into flames again. It seemed that he was really angry. He stuffed the remaining half of the Ruggiamo into his mouth and swallowed it, and the flames on his body burned even brighter. However, he had learned his lesson this time. He knew that he should stay away from the table and the door. After all, they looked more expensive than the chairs. He stared at Meg and prepared to take out a big fireball to scare Meg. In his eyes, there was no difference between chairs. Meg was talking nonsense. Wasn't he just trying to cheat him of his money? He couldn't accept that. Big bald head, be a good boy and listen to father, or I'll burn you with a fireball. Amy, who was standing in front of Meg, squatted down and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. She looked up at Sargeras, who was covered in flowing lava and flames, and said seriously, "Little girl, step aside. This is between us adults," Sargeras said in a hoarse voice. He looked at Amy, who was standing in front of Meg, and felt a sense of helplessness. Seeing this, the customers all became a little nervous. Compared with Sargeras, who was on fire and had lava grooves on his skin, who looked a little scary, the little Amy and the skinny Meg were completely defenseless. Mabai also turned his head with a frown, but there was not much worry in his eyes. The fireball that Amy casually released the other day scared Hag, and Mr. Mac didn't look like a fool. He definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. Alas, I really don't know what to do with you. Why can't you just be obedient? Amy sighed. She reached out her little hand, and a bluish-purple flame suddenly rose up and slowly condensed into a fist-sized fireball in her hand. She looked at Sargeras seriously and said, "Eat, pay, or I'll burn you all to death. Are you going to burn me with such a small flame?" Sargeras looked at the small fireball in Amy's hand and couldn't help but laugh. He looked up at Meg and frowned. "Boss, you're a big man. Do you only know how to hide behind your little girl? My father is very powerful, but it's my job to collect money. So burn, big bald head." Amy said angrily before Meg could become the god of cookery. She waved her hand, and the bluish-purple fireball in her hand flew toward Sargeras. Heh. Sargeras looked at the small fireball that was not much bigger than his thumb. He didn't seem to care at all. He reached out his right hand and casually grabbed it, intending to extinguish it. Chapter 67. The bluish-purple fireball exploded with a bang and wrapped around Sargeras's hand. It quickly spread along the red flames on his body, as if someone had poured a ladle of alcohol on a fire. Almost instantly, the flames covered his entire body, and a bluish-purple flame appeared on top of the red flames. The two flames seemed to be devouring each other. Whoosh! Everyone gasped at the scene. They hadn't expected a small fireball from Amy to wrap around Sargeras. They wondered how powerful the bluish-purple flame was. Sargeras glanced at the bluish-purple flames on his body and said nonchalantly, "A flame of this level is simply..." However, he stopped abruptly in the middle of his sentence and stared at his right hand. The red flames that had touched the bluish-purple flames had been completely consumed. Although the bluish-purple flames were also almost exhausted, there was still a scorching sensation coming from his right hand. And this was only the beginning. After a hole appeared on his right hand, the burning sensation quickly spread upward. He hadn't felt heat for a long time, but now he felt a little hot. His hard skin even felt like it was being pricked by needles. Meg was a little surprised to see the change in Sargeras's expression. He had thought that Amy's fireball would have no effect on Sargeras, a lava demon, since it couldn't even burn charcoal. But now, it seemed that the situation was a little different from what he had imagined. Amy's fireball seemed to be very powerful. As a weakling with a combat prowess of only 1.5, Mag naturally couldn't just charge forward and fight with his life on the line. That was no different from suicide, and he wouldn't do that. But he wasn't worried that Sargeras would tear down the restaurant. It was obvious that he was very satisfied with the Ruggiamo. It could even be said that he craved it. It must have some kind of urgent effect on him. This was where Meg's confidence came from. Other than Amy's, there was no other restaurant on the Norland continent that could make Ruggiamo like this. Therefore, no matter how angry this lava demon was, he wouldn't attack the restaurant or the father and daughter. It was a good choice to test the upper limit of Amy's fireball. Since he was covered in fire, he shouldn't be easily burned. Is it not enough? Amy looked at Sargeras and frowned. Then she reached out her hand and muttered, "If one can't solve it, then two." "Stop, stop, stop." Hiss. "It's hot." Sargeras immediately jumped back as he waved his hand at Amy. The lava on his body quickly circulated, and his skin turned a fiery red color. Only then was he able to withstand the bluish-purple flames, which had already completely exhausted the red flames. Sargeras heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Amy, who was still holding out her hand, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, "I'm not coming. I'm not coming anymore. One is enough." His eyes were filled with fear and helplessness. Many customers in the restaurant burst out laughing. Sargeras, who was huge and hot all over, was standing in front of the cute and small Amy as if she were a cat or a mouse. This scene was a little funny no matter how you looked at it. But apart from the laughter, they were also a little surprised. This lava demon didn't look like a demon with an empty shell. This race was very powerful among the demons. If it weren't for the fact that there were so few of them, they could probably be ranked among the top 10 demon races. But such a powerful lava demon was scared by Amy's fireball. He was even a little afraid that she would use another one. This was the domain that he was best at and most powerful in. How could he admit defeat just like that? How scary was Amy's fire? The customers were already thinking about it in their minds. They looked at Meg in a different way. How could a person who could open such a stylish and delicious restaurant be simple? Even his 4-year-old daughter had the ability to frighten lava demons. It seemed that he couldn't be picky in the future, and he couldn't lose his temper in the restaurant. He also had to pay for the meal obediently. They couldn't bear such a fireball. Sargeras heard the laughter of the crowd, and his already red face became even redder. He was a lava demon warrior, and now he was scared of a little half-elf girl. It was indeed a little sullen. Although the bluish-purple fire was a little scary, it wasn't the main reason he was scared. The slow-spreading speed was enough for him to summon a lava meteorite and destroy the restaurant 3 times. But what could he do? If he destroyed the restaurant, the breakthrough opportunity that he had been searching for 50 years would also be ruined. This was something he couldn't accept. So he couldn't touch the restaurant, the boss, and the little daughter of the boss. But if he ate another bluish-purple fireball, he felt that a layer of his skin would be burned. The process would be very painful, and he might not be able to resist the urge to attack. After thinking about it, he could only admit defeat. That's enough. Meg put his hand on Amy's head gently and motioned her to take back the fire that was about to come out. He also stopped smiling. He looked at Sargeras seriously and said, "Sir, the restaurant has rules. Fighting and threatening the boss and staff are strictly forbidden in the restaurant. Otherwise, you will be blacklisted and banned from the restaurant forever." "Boss, I was just kidding. You see, the little girl is very happy." Hearing that, Sargeras quickly extinguished the fire on his body, rubbed his bald head, and laughed awkwardly. Then he quickly put the gold coins in his hand on the table and said, 10 gold coins for the chair and 3 gold coins for the Laji Ruggiamo. Here's all the money you're supposed to give me. But boss, I don't have enough money today. Can you sell me 10 Laji Ruggiamos on credit? I swear on my reputation as a lava demon warrior that I will pay you back as soon as I earn the money from the adventure today." Meg shook his head. He walked to the table and turned over the menu. There were 3 rules on it. "I'm sorry, but the restaurant has rules. We don't accept any so-called reputation guarantees. We only accept cash. No credit." "System, you're so smart." Meg praised the system in his mind when he saw the 3rd rule on the menu about no fighting and threatening the boss. "The writing fee is 16 silver coins. Automatically deducted," the system said. "Can you stop thinking about making money all day long? Can you be a little more serious?" Meg couldn't help but complain in his heart. "But Sargeras still didn't give up. He wanted to eat 10 of these Ruggiamos that could loosen the shackles. Apart from the effect, they were also the most delicious. Chapter 68. What's this? In the Aiden Square outside the restaurant, a white-haired old man in a pure white magician's robe was resting under a large tree when he suddenly looked up with a surprised expression. His deep eyes narrowed slightly as he murmured to himself, "This magic wave. Could it be that it's from the elven race? No, it should be a human. That's not right either. Strange. What is it? What a strange magic wave." Crassus Io hesitated for a moment. Then he picked up his staff, which was as tall as a man, and walked slowly toward the restaurant. He had been wandering in Chaos City for many days without finding anything. Maybe he could find a surprise here. In the restaurant, Sargeras looked at the menu on the table, Amy, who was encouraging him, and Meg, who didn't seem to want to negotiate. He sighed helplessly. Money is indeed important in this world. Although he felt that Meg was a little unreasonable, when he thought of the delicious and magical Ruggiamo, Sargeras felt that it was understandable that the owner of the Ruggiamo had some rules and temper. Besides, even this little girl could use such a terrifying fireball spell. Meg was very likely to be a powerful magic caster. But he looked so young and didn't wear any magic accessories, so it was easy to ignore him. When he was in the capital of the Roth Empire, he saw a white-haired old human magic caster who defeated a giant dragon with a fireball spell. He was very powerful. Later, he heard that the old magic caster was a consecrator of the royal family and one of the most powerful magic casters in the Roth Empire. He didn't remember the old magic caster's name. Okay, then I won't break the restaurant's rules. I'm Sargeras. I'll be back. Sargeras reached out his hand to Meg. Sargeras? Meg was a little confused. Although he wasn't a fan of games, he must have played World of Warcraft. He hesitated for a moment, and then asked, "Where's your burning legion?" Huh. Sargeras looked at Meg in confusion. "Looks like you just have the same name." Meg heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Sargeras's hand with lava flowing out of it, he shook his head awkwardly. "It's nothing. I'm Meg. You're welcome to come again. But for the handshake, I still have work to do, so it's not suitable for me to bandage it." "Okay, Mr. Mac. Goodbye." Sargeras was stunned for a moment. He looked down at his hand and realized that even though he was a human mage, he was still human after all. He generously withdrew his hand, and when he turned around, his body temperature returned to normal. At least he wouldn't melt the door handle when he reached out to open the door. "Burning Legion?" Sargeras nodded thoughtfully as he exited the restaurant and strode toward the exit of the Aiden Square. "Father, isn't Meg very powerful?" Amy looked up at Meg and asked, as if she was asking for credit. "Yes, Amy is super powerful. She's been a great help." Meg patted Amy's head with a smile. He felt that he was relying on Amy to put up a strong front. He didn't have any background or power, so he could only rely on this tiger's front for the time being. It wasn't a bad thing for the time being, but improving his strength was a rather urgent matter. Amy smiled happily, and her little face was full of satisfaction. "Mr. Mac, I'd like to order 2 new dishes." At this moment, the customer who had just entered the restaurant and hadn't ordered yet raised his hand carefully. His tone was rather polite. "I'll have 2 dishes too." "It's okay. You can take your time." The customer next to him also had an amiable smile. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded with a smile. He let Amy and Ugly Duckling play first while he strode quickly to the kitchen. "Looks like the magic wave just now was released by this little fellow, right?" Crassus stopped outside the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at Amy, who was holding an orange and white little beast in her arms. He was a little shocked, and then shook his head with a look of pity. He sighed and said, "What a pity. She was supposed to be a very talented prodigy, but the conflict between the 2 bloodlines ruined her. Otherwise, the purpose of this trip would have been achieved. This man is really a sinner. What a good piece of unpolished jade. Just a little bit of polishing, and she'll become a great treasure." Crassus was so angry that he stomped his feet. He hesitated to leave, but his eyes were fixed on Amy, and he couldn't move his feet. He just stood in front of the window like a fool. "Ugly Duckling, do you think this white-bearded grandpa is standing there without moving because he doesn't have money, so he doesn't dare to come in? It's just like the little match girl. If he also sells matches, shouldn't we buy one for him?" Amy also noticed Crassus standing outside the window. She walked closer with Ugly Duckling in her arms and looked up and down at Crassus with her big eyes. She wanted to see if he had a little basket full of matches hidden in his robe. "Meow," Ugly Duckling responded. It also looked up and down, although it didn't know what a match was. "This little fellow is very intelligent. Although she's a half-elf, she might be a talent. Maybe I can get in touch with her." Crassus thought to himself as he looked at Amy, who had her hair tied up in 2 pigtails and was looking at him with her big blue eyes. She was very intelligent and very cute. However, he took a look at the busy restaurant and the timetable hanging on the door and didn't rush into the restaurant. Instead, he stared at Amy and Ugly Duckling through the transparent glass for half an hour. When Meg was serving the dishes, he also noticed Crassus standing outside the window in a white magician robe. Compared to Julian, who was wearing a black magician robe and looked a little cold and gloomy, Crassus had long white hair and a long white beard. He was wearing a white magician robe and holding a light gray magician's staff. He was more in line with Su Yangyi's imagination and aesthetics of magic casters. Amy stood for a while, and then sat down at a table near the window with Ugly Duckling in her arms. They continued to stare at each other without blinking. Their eyes didn't move at all except when they were collecting money. When it was almost 9 o'clock, there were fewer and fewer customers in the restaurant. The 64 Rigiamos were sold out at 8:30. Many customers who didn't get to try them begged Meg to make more next time. Meg felt a little helpless. Of course, he wanted to make more Rigiamos and sell them for more money. It seemed that he had to work harder from tomorrow onward. When there were only 3 customers left in the restaurant, Crassus looked away from Amy, walked to the door, and pushed it open. "Welcome," Meg said with a smile. He was the first magician to come to the restaurant. Chapter 69. The Grandpa Who Sells Matches? Meg was taken aback. Looking at Amy's sympathetic eyes, he suddenly remembered the story of the little match girl that he had told her before. It seemed that she had mistaken Crassus, who had been waiting outside the window for a long time, as a poor man who had no money to eat. However, this magic caster didn't look like a poor man. Judging from his demeanor and temperament, he was either an expert or someone who had been in a high position for a long time. He didn't show the slightest bit of surprise at the various furnishings in the restaurant, which showed that these things weren't rare to him. The so-called vision and background could often be seen from the small details. Yes, look at how pitiful he is. He has been waiting outside the window for so long, and no one has bought a match from him. Why don't we buy one for him? Amy nodded at Meg, and then looked at Crassus with pity and comforted him. "Grandpa, don't worry. Although you will starve to death even if we buy one match, you are still better off than that little girl who didn't even sell a match. You should be able to die without regrets." Crassus was a little taken aback by Amy's words. This little girl seemed to have misunderstood something. He shook his head with a smile and said, "Little girl, I'm actually not selling. I know you must be cold and hungry and want to eat roast goose, right?" Amy interrupted Crassus. She hugged Ugly Duckling and shrank back a little, and said with vigilance and difficulty, "But Ugly Duckling is still a baby. You can't eat it. You have to raise it." Meow. Ugly Duckling turned its head to look up at Amy with its eyes wide open. It realized that things weren't as simple as it seemed. Crassus was at a loss for words. He didn't seem to have said anything, and this little girl had put a strange identity on him. He had become a poor old man who wanted to eat roast goose even though he didn't have money to eat. Most importantly, what did this have to do with that cat-like little beast? Looking at the vigilant Amy, Meg almost burst out laughing. Seeing the awkward look on Crassus's face, he hurriedly said with a smile, "Sorry, Amy took my story seriously. What would you like to eat? The menu is on the table. You can check it yourself. Laggi Ruggiamo is sold out." "All right." Crassus didn't think much of it. He sat down across from Amy and leaned his wand against the glass window behind him. He smiled kindly at Amy and picked up the menu on the table. His purpose of entering the restaurant was to test whether Amy had the talent to learn magic and, at the same time, to find out the intentions of the restaurant owner. However, asking such a question as soon as he sat down was obviously a bit abrupt. Of course, he wasn't worried that someone would refuse his request. As long as he revealed his identity, the people on the Norland continent who wanted to be his disciple could line up from the imperial palace to the gate of the capital. Accepting a half-elf as his disciple would put him under some pressure from the outside world, but he didn't care about that anymore after he was over 120 years old. Now, he just wanted to find a suitable disciple and pass on all he had learned in his life. As for whether the disciple was a human, an elf, or even a half-elf Crassus, he didn't care. They could say whatever they wanted. Who would dare to teach an old man like him a lesson? This restaurant was the most comfortable one he had been to in Chaos City these days. Of course, it was only comfortable. Compared with the imperial palace of the Roth Empire, it was far from luxurious. The restaurant had been very lively earlier. Since there were so many customers in such a corner, he thought that the restaurant must have a good variety of dishes. However, when he opened the menu, he found that there were only 2 dishes on it. Just now, the owner said that Laggi Ruggiamo was sold out, which meant that only the top dish, Yangzhou fried rice, was available now. "Boss, what's this Yangzhou fried rice?" Crassus looked up at Meg and asked. He had lived for more than 120 years and had never heard of this kind of food. And 600 copper coins was not cheap. 1 plate was enough to feed an ordinary family of 3 for 10 days. "It's super delicious. It's super delicious rainbow fried rice," Amy answered quickly. Then she looked at Crassus worriedly and said, "I know you want to eat it, but we don't take matches. We only take cash. If you don't pay after eating it, I'll set you on fire." "Actually, I have money." Crassus smiled gently. An old, skinny hand reached out from his loose magician robe and laid flat on the table. There were 2 dragon coins in his palm. Huh, don't you sell matches? Amy looked at the dragon coins in Crassus' hand with a puzzled expression. I don't sell matches, but if you want, I can make a match for you. Crassus snapped his fingers on the table, and a match as thick as a pinky and 2 fingers long appeared on his fingertip. Mag looked at this scene with astonishment. This was a magic that was more advanced than magic. Creating something out of thin air was indeed an impressive feat compared to Amy's fireball, which could only cause destruction. Crassus' ability to make a match was more like a technical work. It was as if he had integrated magic into his daily life. He could do it so easily, he thought to himself. This must be a very powerful magician. Wow, do you know magic? Amy looked at the match in Crassus' hand, and her eyes lit up. Crassus smiled and nodded. I'm a magician. Of course I know magic. This is just a little trick. The real magic can drive back dragons and stop trolls. Do you want to learn it? Huh. Meg thought Crassus was going to order food. He didn't expect him to change the topic and try to persuade Amy to learn magic. This made him a little wary. Although Amy also wanted to learn magic, their identities were a little special, and they couldn't expose it yet. Meg secretly left the capital with Amy and came to Chaos City because he didn't want to live under the ridicule of those people. Those people left him alive that night because they wanted to see him make a fool of himself. But later, he faked a suicide scene, changed his appearance, and settled down here. 4 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Most people should have thought that they were dead, but the safety of the father and daughter was at stake, so they couldn't be too careful. Besides, Amy's magic talent was very likely inherited from her mother. If it was a talent unique to the Elven royal family, then it was even more important to find a trustworthy magic caster to be her teacher. No, I don't want to. She pointed at Mag and proudly said, My father is also a super powerful magic caster. He conjured up a beautiful restaurant, and he can cook all kinds of delicious food. Can you do that? Mag nodded. Mag nodded. That's right. Crassus was stunned. He really didn't know how to cook. However, when he looked up at Meg, Crassus didn't sense any magic waves from him. The restaurant was also built and decorated with ordinary materials. Although the materials used were much better than ordinary restaurants, it had nothing to do with magic. It seemed that the owner had told some lies in order to create a good image in his daughter's heart. Chapter 70. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and turned to the kitchen. He was quite satisfied with Amy's answer. At least the little girl didn't agree to teach her magic immediately. However, it seemed that this magic caster didn't intend to give up, so he was still a little wary. White-bearded grandpa, where are you from? Amy was sure that Crassus wasn't here to sell matches and that he had money on him, so she wasn't in a hurry to let him go. She asked curiously, My name is Crassus Io. I'm from Rodu, the capital of the Roth Empire. It took me half a year to reach Chaos City, which is dozens of times bigger than Chaos City, Crassus said with a smile, trying to make his voice and expression as friendly as possible. If the people in the Tower of Offerings saw the usually serious and even rigid Lord Crassus talking to a little girl in such a friendly manner, they would be shocked speechless. Meg, who had just reached the kitchen door, suddenly stopped and couldn't help but clench his fists. Half of the powerful human magic casters were in Rodu, the capital of the Roth Empire. The most powerful ones were enshrined in the glorious 36-story Magus Tower in the palace. These people were worshipped by the royal family, so that tower was also called the Tower of Offerings. 2 of the 3 magic casters who attacked him back then were from the Tower of Offerings, which meant that the incident was tacitly approved by the royal family, or at least, it was incited by some of the royal family. Although the incident had shaken the empire's military, the king ordered the Magus Tower to be reorganized, and 2 small fries from the royal family were thrown out as scapegoats to suppress the incident. Meg found the name Crassus in the memory of his predecessor. He was one of the magic casters enshrined in the royal family of the empire. It was said that he was more than 120 years old and was a little mysterious and reclusive. He rarely stepped out of the Magus Tower and never participated in any important events in the Roth Empire. Even the king couldn't do anything about him. As a knight, Meg didn't care much about mages and had never seen Crassus before. Until now, he still didn't know if the incident back then was the result of a discussion among all the mages in the Mage Tower, or if the two mages were instructed to do so. But no matter what, Meg had to keep Amy away from Crassus. The Tower of Worship was too complicated, and Crassus, as one of the most senior magicians, must have heard about the incident back then. His judgment could not be underestimated. Furthermore, he was trying to entice Amy into joining Rendezvous, and that made him feel a little uneasy. He definitely wasn't going to allow Amy to leave his side, and he definitely wasn't going to let her go to that lifeless Magus Tower in Rendezvous. Having made up his mind, Meg went straight into the kitchen and started preparing the ingredients to make Yangzhou fried rice. Has he been walking for half a year? Amy raised her head and thought for a while. Just when Crassus thought she was going to ask Crassus what fun things there were in Rendezvous, Amy sighed. She looked at Crassus and said earnestly, "White-bearded grandpa, you're already so old, but you've been walking for more than half a year. It's better for you to stay at home. If you fall on the road, other people will have to carry you back. That's so troublesome." Crassus almost choked on his own breath. If he took a horse-drawn carriage from Rendezvous to Chaos City, it would take him about 20 days to get there every day. But his goal was to find a good seedling, so he took a lot of detours and visited many places along the way. He didn't expect Amy to be the best evidence that half of his leg was already in the ground. "Actually, I know more powerful magic." Crassus tried to calm himself down and tried to attract Amy's attention with magic again. Amy looked down at Ugly Duckling and asked, "Ugly Duckling, do you want to see it?" Ugly Duckling glanced at Crassus and shook its head. Amy also shrugged and said, "I don't want to see it either." For the first time, Crassus felt that children weren't as gullible as he thought. Or rather, this half-elf girl was more difficult to deal with than he thought. She had a sharp tongue and a jumpy mind. She didn't follow the rules at all. Just when Crassus was thinking hard about how to make Amy interested in him, Meg came out with a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. He put it in front of him and said with a smile, "Your Yangzhou fried rice? What's this?" Crassus looked at the colorful fried rice in front of him, and his eyes immediately lit up. Just like Amy said, the rice was as colorful as a rainbow, and it was fried into a plate. The rice wrapped in golden eggs, and the various ingredients that were the size of rice grains had been cut into pieces by exquisite knife skills. The unique aroma of the eggs and the various ingredients made him swallow involuntarily. Such a rich aroma was even more enticing than the ones made by the chefs in the palace. Crassus, who had lost his appetite for many years, had an urge to try it. He picked up the spoon and put a spoonful into his mouth. The eggs wrapped in the rice were so tender, and the salty gravy flowed out of the ham after he bit into it. The taste of all the ingredients combined together made him feel as if his taste buds, which had been dormant for a long time, had been reborn. They were nourished by the delicious taste, and he was experiencing what it was like to be delicious again. However, when he bit into the rice wrapped in the egg, he suddenly opened his eyes. The rice was exceptionally sweet and refreshing, and had a comforting aroma that flowed down his throat and nourished every part of his body. It was this familiar smell that surprised and puzzled him. It was the smell of the spring of life. It was the holy spring of the elves. Years ago, when an interesting elf girl came to visit him, she brought him a small bottle of the spring of life. The smell left a deep impression on him, and it was the most important reason why he had been able to survive all these years. Even he had only tasted it 3 times in his life. The other 2 times were the benefits of being a consecrator of the royal family. It was a pity that the girl, such a good girl, had met the wrong person. Moreover, where did the smell of the spring of life come from in this Yangzhou fried rice? Did the owner pour the spring of life into the rice when he was cooking? Even if it was only a drop, it was still something incredible. Chapter 71. Crassus put down the spoon gently. There was not a single grain of rice left on the plate. He chewed the last mouthful of fried rice carefully, savoring the taste spreading in his mouth. After swallowing, it turned into a warm current, nourishing his almost dried-up flesh and blood. It was as if a new life force was blooming. Even if it was just the last radiance of the setting sun. It made him feel that life had become better. "Boss, give me another helping." Crassus put down the spoon and looked up at Meg. He couldn't remember how long it had been since he had the urge to have another bowl of fried rice, but today, he felt that he could have another bowl. "I'm sorry, sir. The opening hours for this morning have ended, and it's been more than 3 minutes. You can come back during other opening hours." Meg shook his head slightly. The clock on the wall was already pointing to 9:03. His expression showed that there was no room for negotiation. Crassus looked at Meg, took out 3 dragon coins, and put them on the table gently. "I just want another helping. I'm willing to pay double." "Sorry, this is the restaurant's rule." Meg still shook his head. If it were an old man, he might have made an exception and agreed. But since it was Crassus, he couldn't wait for him to leave as soon as possible. In his opinion, this was a somewhat dangerous person. "Father." Amy looked up at Meg, a little hesitant. She felt that the white-bearded grandpa looked quite pitiful and even offered double the price. But when she saw Meg's expression, she swallowed the rest of her words. "Okay, come back at noon for the next helping." Crassus looked at Meg deeply to make sure that he wasn't expecting him to continue raising the price. He reached out and put away the 2 dragon coins. Although he wanted to ask about the spring of life, he hesitated and decided to bring it up later. He straightened his magician's robe and sat up a little. He looked at Meg and said, "Boss, apart from that, I have something to discuss with you. I'm Crassus, a 10th-tier magician from the Roth Empire. As I'm getting old, I want to take in a disciple to inherit my legacy. I just sensed a strange magic wave from this little girl. Can you let me check her talent? Maybe she and I are fated." Meg's pupils contracted. A 10th-tier magic caster was the most powerful magic caster on the Norland continent. There were no more than 15 10th-tier magic casters on the entire continent. There were only 4 or 5 worshippers in the Roth Empire, but this Crassus shouldn't have been on the list. However, judging from his expression, it was as if he was talking about something normal and didn't seem to be lying. "If you want to take Amy as your disciple, are you planning to bring her back to Rodu?" Meg asked calmly as he looked at Crassus. Crassus nodded. "Yes, there are many tools in the Mage Tower that are suitable for beginners to practice magic. There is also a complete magic room there, which makes it easier for the learner to become familiar with magic. As my apprentice, she has the right to enter the Mage Tower. It is the holy land in the hearts of all magicians." The Mage Tower was a revered place in the hearts of most magic casters on the Norland continent. The Mage Tower was an important reason why Rodu was able to retain a terrifying number of magic casters. Even a normal person should know what it meant to enter the Mage Tower, so he wasn't worried that Meg would refuse. Meg shook his head without any hesitation. "Sorry, I don't want Amy to leave my side, and I won't let her go to Rodu alone, so I don't think we're fated." "Yes, I won't leave, Father." Amy nodded. She sat down in her chair and reached out to grab one of Meg's fingers. "This," Crassus faltered. He was a 10th-tier magic caster and a worshipper of the Roth Empire. He wanted to test Amy. If she met the requirements, he could take her as his disciple and bring her back to the Rodu Magus Tower to learn magic. Even the nobles in the imperial capital would go crazy over such an offer. He didn't think that he would be rejected by the owner of a small restaurant in Chaos City. Along the way, Crassus had seen a lot of potential candidates. Many people even wanted to send their children to him, even if they wanted to be apprentices. Crassus didn't even need to reveal his identity. However, Meg didn't even want to give him a chance to test Amy. He was a little surprised by this, but he didn't lose his composure. He smiled again and said, "Boss, you're in Chaos City, so you might not know much about magic casters. The Magus Tower. You want Amy to leave me? That's enough. I don't want to know anything else." Meg cut off Crassus. He glanced at his watch and said with a polite smile, "Sorry, sir. We still have to go out to buy some goat's milk for the little one. If you don't have anything else to say, please come back during the next opening hours." "That's right. Ugly Duckling is starving." Amy stroked Ugly Duckling's head and nodded. She took out 4 gold coins from her pocket and put them on the table. Then, she took away the dragon coin and said to Crassus, "White-bearded grandpa, you're so thin. It's a waste to eat too much. Anyway, You won't grow any taller. Let's save it for the next meal. Here's your change." Crassus had mixed feelings. If others knew that he was rejected because he didn't care about a little kitten and goat's milk, no one would believe it. Although he hadn't accepted any disciples along the way, almost everyone respected him very much and wanted to give him money to test Amy. But now, something like this had happened. Furthermore, the father and daughter were sending him off in unison. They didn't have any intention of negotiating at all. "All right, I'll come back next time." After being rejected for the first time, Crassus reluctantly put away the gold coins on the table, picked up his magic staff, and walked toward the door. "Be careful of the stairs, white-bearded grandpa. If you fall, you won't be able to get up," Amy said to Crassus, who was holding the door handle. Crassus' hands suddenly froze. He turned around abruptly to look at Amy, who had a worried look on her little face. He seemed to see the elf girl from all those years ago. At that time, he was holding onto the windowsill on the 32nd floor of the Magus Tower and coughing violently. His life was about to come to an end. Suddenly, a crisp and worried voice sounded from behind him. "Be careful of the windowsill, white-bearded grandpa. If you fall, you might smash someone to death." Chapter 72. The girl stared at him for a while, and then threw a small gourd at him helplessly. She said it was spring water from her home, and it would help to quench his thirst. Then, she continued to climb upstairs. The Magus Tower wasn't a place that anyone could enter, especially outsiders. It was a forbidden area. However, Crassus wanted to feel some care and warmth before he left this world, so he opened the gourd and took a sip. Only then did he realize that it was the milk of life, which was even more precious than the spring of life. There were only 3 drops, but it was those 3 drops of milk of life that had extended his life for more than 10 years. She really gave such a precious thing to an old man whom she didn't even know. She didn't even ask for his name, as if it was a gourd of spring water from her home. He later found out that she was the princess of the elves, the only heir to the throne. She did bring the milk of life from her home, and thought it was just right to quench his thirst. She gave it to him when she saw him coughing so badly. That was the first time she came to the Roth Empire. She came with an elven minister for a friendly visit. Somehow, she fooled the guards at the entrance of the Magus Tower and went all the way up to the 36th floor. On the top floor, she wrote, "The elven princess was here," before she went down the tower with satisfaction. Because of her special status, the king couldn't blame her. He even left the line of green words on the top of the Magus Tower for her as a proof of the peace and friendship between the 2 races. "Okay." Crassus collected his thoughts and nodded at Amy with a smile. Maybe it was because she was half-elven, but this little girl's eyebrows did resemble her. He pushed open the door and walked out of the restaurant. He hadn't received greetings from the elves for a few years. All news about that incident had been blocked, and he had only heard about it. General Alex had died in the demon's ambush, and there had been no news about her in the past few years. Apart from a small group of people who stood at the top of the 2 races, no one would connect the 2 incidents. Seems like the owner doesn't want the little girl to leave him. Is he asking him to go to the Magus Tower with her? Crassus looked back at the restaurant and murmured. He walked away slowly with his staff. How did this guy come out of the coffin tower? Not far away, Julian was standing at the entrance of the magic potion shop in his black robe. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the receding Crassus with a ball of dark green flames dancing in his hand. He suddenly turned to look at the restaurant nearby, where Meg was walking out with Amy, who was holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. His gaze fell on Amy, and his brows furrowed even deeper as he murmured to himself, "Could it be that that old bastard wants to take this little girl as his disciple?" Meg also noticed Julian's gaze from afar. Although he knew that Amy was a genius, the feeling of being stared at by others still made him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. Besides, Crassus looked more decent. The status of a royal consecrator was an honor, but it also represented a responsibility and restraint. His neighbor, who was wearing a black mage robe, gave him the feeling that he was a dark mage. Whether it was his appearance, his voice, or his slow movements, they all exuded a sinister aura. "Good morning, Grandpa Turtle." "Good morning, Black Coal, Green Pea." Amy stopped in her tracks and greeted him with a smile. Turtle. Meg raised an eyebrow. Although Julian was a little hunchbacked, most people didn't like to be given a nickname because of that. It could be said that it was a little impolite. Amy might not understand, but he couldn't just let it go like that. He was just about to apologize. Morning. Julian looked up at him in response. His voice sounded like two pieces of metal rubbing against each other, and it was a little harsh and scary. Meg swallowed his words. It seemed that he didn't dislike it. However, he felt like he had just seen Crassus gaze. If he also wanted to take Amy as his disciple, then he would have a headache. Black coal still had 2 leaves on its body, and it leaned over to look at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms. Amy, what's that ugly thing in your arms? It's clearly much cuter than you. But aren't cats only white and black? Why is it orange and white? Green Pea also leaned over and gave Black Coal a disdainful look before asking curiously. Meow. Ugly Duckling meowed at Black Coal and stretched out its little pink paws as if it wanted to show off its sharp claws. However, even its meow now had a soft, baby voice. A cat. Black Coal jumped back in shock. However, when he looked at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, he raised his head proudly and said, "The esteemed Fama Odin Bin wouldn't be afraid of an ugly kitten with an abnormal color. It's not a cat. It's Ugly Duckling." Amy shook her head and stroked Ugly Duckling's head to comfort it. She looked at Black Coal and said, "Black Coal, you're clearly the ugliest here. Ugly Duckling can only be ranked second now. Furthermore, it can grow up." Black Coal became a little nervous upon hearing that. He looked at Ugly Duckling, who was wagging its little tail proudly in Amy's arms, and said with disdain, "I'm not afraid of this little thing. With its short legs, do you think it can jump so high into the cage? Besides, it grew up in a restaurant. You're going to die of fat. Let's go, Amy. I still have to go back to the restaurant to prepare the ingredients." Meg smiled as he stroked Amy's head. The ingredients for the Laji meat mask had to be prepared in advance, and he felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by Julian. "Goodbye." Amy waved her hand and left with Meg. "Maybe I can also check her out. If she's suitable for dark magic, it would be interesting to steal a disciple from that old guy Crassus." Julian murmured to himself as he watched Amy's back. Meg bought some goat's milk from the market and filled a bottle for Amy and Ugly Duckling. Seeing the 2 little ones sucking happily, he poured a cup for himself and drank it. Although strengthening one's body couldn't be completed in a day or two, he could still feel his strength slowly increasing. Meg looked at the mission progress chart in his mind as he kneaded the dough. He didn't have to worry about the mission of selling 1,000 Rugiamos. With his current progress, he could complete it in about 6 days. However, there were only 10 more customers in the restaurant in the morning, which meant that there were only 10 new customers. There were too many old customers, and this growth rate made him a little anxious. "I have to improve my efficiency. It takes too much time to order and serve food. Amy obviously can't handle these 2 tasks. It's about time to hire someone," Meg thought. Chapter 73. In the end, Meg decided to improve his own efficiency. If he wanted to limit his purchases, he would have to limit the number of takeouts. Instead of squeezing the customers, he would have to let more people in. However, this was an alternate world. After all, Somag still had a very important problem to consider. If there were customers with huge appetites like giant dragons and forest trolls in the future, they might be able to buy the restaurant's entire supply for a day. Should he be forced to limit his supply? Or should he ask the system for a bigger oven and make extra large Rugiamos? He had to think about it when he was free. After all, even Sargeras had ordered 10 Rugiamos in one sitting. Of course, the main reason was that he was selling single items. He had to make every single item by himself. If there were semi-buffet dishes like hot pot and spicy soup, he would be able to save a lot of effort. There was a recruitment agency in the Aden Square. Businesses and people looking for jobs could go to the agency. It had formed a complete industrial chain. It was said that as long as the price was right, any kind of employee could be found. Mag decided to wait for the restaurant's first rest day to come in 2 days, and then he would go to the intermediary to take a look. It didn't matter if the salary was higher, but he had to find someone who was reliable, hardworking, and not talkative, and could do his job well. He had sold out 64 Rigiamos in an hour in the morning, and the lunchtime was half an hour longer. Therefore, Meg planned to make more Rigiamos at noon. If he could make 16 more Rigiamos, he might be able to attract more customers. After drinking the goat's milk, Ugly Duckling fell asleep. Maybe it was because of it. Amy also fell asleep on the counter. Meg looked at Amy's back through the glass window, and a smile appeared on his face. Although there were all kinds of races in this alternate world, he had been living a comfortable life these days. He didn't feel threatened. Under the management of the Grey Temple, Chaos City was very safe. This was why Meg Alex had chosen to come to Chaos City when he was almost disabled. The order established in the chaos made the weak feel more comfortable and safe than the rules established by money and power in the territories of other races. At noon, as usual, they had their lunch in advance. Meg chose to ignore Ugly Duckling's resentful gaze. In any case, he couldn't give it any food right now. Meanwhile, Amy was enjoying her meal right in front of Ugly Duckling. Sometimes, she would even place the spoon in front of it for a while, but she just wouldn't let it have a taste. It was so hungry that it began to beg Amy to let it have a taste. With just this bit of backbone, it seems like you won't be able to become a master in this lifetime. Meg looked at Ugly Duckling, which was begging Amy for food, and heaved an internal sigh. In terms of training, Amy was indeed better than Ugly Duckling. She had managed to train an orange cat to the point where it didn't have any temper. It's useless even if you beg me. Anyway, you can't eat rainbow fried rice right now. I'm seducing you on purpose. Amy smiled happily. She scooped up another spoonful and waved it in front of Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling slowly turned its face away, as if doubting its life as a cat. After lunch, they cleared the plates. Meg poured a bottle of goat's milk for Ugly Duckling. When he passed the bottle to it, Ugly Duckling bared its teeth and showed him its teeth in all directions, as if to remind him that its teeth were all grown out. It's growing quite fast. Looking at its little teeth, Meg was a little surprised. But before Ugly Duckling could be happy, he shook his head again and said, "But it's still not enough. It has to be at least a week before it can eat complimentary food and drink milk for 2 more days." Ugly Duckling was instantly disheartened. It bit its pacifier unhappily and turned its face away from Meg and Amy. It drank its milk silently. Looking at these two fellows, it felt really bad. The number of diners at noon was even more than Meg had expected. Because the restaurant was located in a remote area, it was inconvenient for customers who had a short lunch break to come. Moreover, a meal cost at least 300 copper coins, and not everyone could afford 3 meals a day. So, at noon, the restaurant finally welcomed a small wave of new customers. Over there. Park the carriages further away. Don't spoil the customer's appetite. Don't you see that big transparent crystal? It's so that the customers can see the beautiful scenery of the Aden Square. Harrison got down from the carriage and waved his chubby arms to guide the carriages behind him to stop in the distance. 5 well-dressed young masters got off the carriages. They were basically the same size, with thick legs, bucket waists, and necks almost as thick as their heads. The 6 of them stood in a circle, looking like 6 fat brothers. "Harrison, you sent us a letter saying that you would take us to a new restaurant tonight. Not only is it delicious, but it can also help us lose weight. Is this the restaurant?" One of the fat men in yellow asked Harrison with a puzzled expression. The restaurant's decor was indeed one of the more high-end restaurants in the Aden Square, but these self-proclaimed foodies never cared about the environment of the restaurant. They often patronized roadside stalls with good food. There were indeed many customers in the restaurant at this time, but looking through the transparent crystal, most of the customers were of normal size. If it really could help them lose weight, then why were these skinny people here? Harrison's best friends all came from well-to-do families. The yellow-robed family owned 3 inns, while the green-robed family owned the most popular tea shop in Chaos City. In any case, they didn't have to worry about making a living since they were born, and could even get quite a bit of pocket money every day. Usually, they would eat, drink, and play together. If anyone found a place with good food or fun, they would share it immediately. Therefore, after receiving Harrison's invitation yesterday, they agreed to taste the amazing food that Harrison mentioned this afternoon. Yes, this is the restaurant. But the weight loss effect is only effective for people of our size. Don't say that I didn't explain it clearly later. Harrison nodded. He looked in the direction of the restaurant and lowered his voice, saying, "Remember, don't mess with the restaurant owner's daughter. Even orcs and demons have to be afraid of her." She's that scary? Everyone was shocked to hear that. Harrison was one of the boldest people in the group, but now he was so afraid of the restaurant owner's daughter. They all nodded. "Let's go in. I'm hungry." Harrison pushed open the door and entered the restaurant, and the others followed him. The 6 fat men, who weighed more than 100 kilograms on average, walked in one after another. The light outside dimmed and cast a row of shadows, attracting the attention of the customers who were eating. Chapter 74. Ugly Duckling poked its head out of Amy's arms and stared at them with wide eyes. It was the first time it had seen so many fat men, and its eyes were full of curiosity. Meg, who had just come out with 4 Ruggiamos, was also a little surprised. Harrison had said he would bring his friends here, and he didn't expect that he would really bring 5 of them today. However, as Mag looked at these 6 unusual customers, the image of them happily eating Ruggiamos with their fat jiggling all over their bodies flashed through his mind. The picture was so beautiful that Meg didn't dare to keep thinking about it. However, he was quite happy to have 5 new guests. "Mr. Mac, I'd like 3 Ruggiamos, please." Harrison sat down at a table and said to Meg as if he was familiar with him. Since he had Ruggiamos at noon yesterday, he had eaten 3 meals in the restaurant for the past 2 days. He had woken up a little late this morning, so he didn't get to eat Ruggiamos, so he made an appointment with them at noon a little earlier. They arrived shortly after the restaurant opened for business. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and turned to go into the kitchen. They divided into 2 groups and sat down at a table of 3. "It smells so good." The fat man in yellow couldn't help taking a few deep breaths as soon as he sat down. He looked around, trying to find the source of the aroma. "Yeah, what meat is this? How can it smell so good?" The aroma of the meat in the air made everyone swallow their saliva. They couldn't help but ask Harrison. Different from the aroma of roast meat, this aroma was more enticing. However, their eyes were soon attracted by the Ruggiamo in the hands of the small-eyed man sitting at the next table. The tantalizing aroma of the meat wafted over. There was a white cake in the brown paper bag, and there seemed to be a thick layer of meat in it. He squinted his eyes and took a big bite with both hands. He chewed happily and then swallowed slowly. Gulp. Everyone swallowed their saliva almost at the same time. "What's this? I want that too." They all turned to look at Harrison and asked eagerly. It was too torturous for foodies to watch others eat in front of them. "This is the legendary Lagi Ruggiamo, the delicacy that I strongly recommend for you today," Harrison said calmly. Looking at everyone's expressions, he was actually overjoyed. He just liked seeing them act like they had never seen the world. "Boss, I want 3 Lagi Ruggiamos." "I want 3 too." "Me too." As soon as Harrison finished speaking, everyone had already raised their hands to order. Their appetites were relatively similar, so they all chose to order according to Harrison's portion. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg placed a plate of Yangzhou fried rice in front of a customer, then turned around and went back into the kitchen. When he was busy, he was no different from a spinning top. "What's that colorful thing?" "It also looks delicious." The red-clothed fatty looked at the Yangzhou fried rice and asked curiously, "It's rainbow fried rice. It's super delicious." Amy, who was sitting behind the counter, responded. She looked at the 2 tables of the winter melon core and found it very interesting. Everyone looked over at the same time. When they saw Amy, who looked delicate and cute, sitting behind the counter with a strange-colored kitten in her arms, their eyes lit up. It was rare to see such a cute little girl. Although she looked like a half-elf, the pure-blooded elves they usually saw were not so cute. "That's the boss's daughter," Harrison reminded them in a low voice, covering his mouth with his hand. This morning, he saw with his own eyes that Amy only threw a fireball and made the lava troll admit defeat. Although she looked delicate and cute on the surface, she was actually a little witch through and through. What a cute little girl. She's not as scary as you say. Demons, orcs, and so on must have admitted defeat because she's so cute. The blue-clothed fatty waved his hand. He didn't believe that the harmless-looking Amy could be scary at all. That's right, that's right. I've never seen such a cute little girl. The red-clothed fatty next to him also nodded. Okay, it's up to you. Harrison put his hand to his forehead and felt a headache coming on. It seemed that it would not be easy to convince them that Amy was really scary. Little boss, then I'll have a super delicious rainbow fried rice, the blue-clothed fatty said with a smile. He looked at Amy with a smile. George Francois was the oldest among them. His family had several ironware workshops and shops. He was now in charge of 2 of them, but he usually had nothing to do, so he just followed Harrison and the others. But unlike them, he already had a wife and 3 sons, the oldest of whom was already 5 years old. George had always wanted a cute little daughter, but he had 3 sons in a row. Now, his 4th son was already in his wife's womb. His wife said that if this one was a boy, he should marry a concubine. Anyway, she was not going to give birth anymore. Whoever wanted to give birth could do it. Of course, he didn't dare to marry a concubine. After all, his wife, who had always been gentle, was holding a pair of scissors behind her back when she said that. If it weren't for his sharp eyes, he probably wouldn't be able to think about anything in the future. Because of this resentment and expectation, he usually liked other girls. After seeing Amy, he was even more envious of Meg. He was so lucky to have such a cute daughter. Okay. Amy nodded, then turned to the kitchen and said, Father, Uncle Blue Fatty wants a rainbow fried rice. Pfft. Harrison and the others burst out laughing. Although they were about the same size, they were still very happy to see George being given such a nickname. George was stunned, and his expression became a little strange. Uncle Blue Fatty, what kind of nickname is this? But looking at Amy's cute and serious expression, he just couldn't get angry. Even he wanted to laugh. Uncle's yellow fatty, green fatty, red fatty, green fatty, and gray fatty, what are you laughing about? Amy asked curiously as she looked at everyone who was convulsing with laughter. Everyone's laughter stopped abruptly. They looked at each other's clothes, and their expressions became a little interesting. This girl is indeed not as simple as she looks. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's mind at the same time. They were really angry and wanted to laugh at the same time. Ha ha ha, red fatty. Harrison was the first to lose it. He looked at the fat man in red opposite him and laughed. Gray fatty, don't talk. The fat man in red was speechless. He also wanted to laugh. I can't. Why do I still want to laugh even though I'm being mocked? If it were in the past, we would have flipped the table. The fat man in yellow was a little puzzled as he tried to hold back his laughter. Chapter 75. Meg made 2 ruggiamos for Harrison first. The ruggiamos were put into the pot in batches, so they couldn't be cooked all at once. The rest had to be cooked out slowly. Besides, ruggiamos were best eaten while they were hot. The delicious gravy was still in the pot and didn't affect the soft and crisp texture of the ruggiamos. Therefore, even if the customers ordered more than 1 ruggiamos at the same time, Meg would serve them in batches. Of course, those who ordered first got first. Please enjoy. Meg nodded with a smile and turned to the kitchen. The customers who had ordered Yangzhou fried rice had been waiting for a while. This smell. The fat man in red sitting opposite Harrison smelled the rich aroma of the meat, and his eyes widened. Looking at Harrison, who was holding a ruggiamo in each hand, he said expectantly, Harrison, let me have a bite first. I want one too. The fat man in cyan leaned over and said, looking at the meat in the ruggiamos, he was full of hunger. No. Harrison shook his head without hesitation. If it were anything else, he would have shared it with everyone. But ruggiamos were out of the question. He had endured the whole morning without eating ruggiamos. Although the Yangzhou fried rice tasted good, it was far from the flying feeling brought by the ruggiamos. Looking at the customers who were looking at him eagerly, he said with a smile, wait for your turn. I'll start first. Is it really that good? The customers thought curiously. Harrison was always easy to talk to. Usually, when he went out for a meal, he would be happy to share his food with everyone if it was served first. But today, he didn't even let them have a bite, which made them look forward to it even more. Harrison raised the ruggiamo in his right hand and took a big bite. Feeling the delicious flavor melting on the tip of his tongue, he couldn't help but close his eyes with a pleasant smile on his face. This feeling made him feel so happy. Gulp. The customer's eyes were fixed on him. When they saw him swallow the Ruggiamo with satisfaction, they couldn't help swallowing. Although they couldn't feel the delicious feeling, they knew it must be very delicious since Harrison, who was always picky, could smile so contentedly. After a mouthful of Ruggiamo, Harrison felt as if he had been electrified. The fat all over his body began to tremble slightly under the influence of his blood. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his face, but he looked even more delighted. He took another big bite, and his body couldn't help but shake. Is this the effect of losing weight? Everyone who came with him looked surprised when they saw this scene. When Harrison said that he could lose weight, they didn't believe it, but now it seemed like it was true. The customers sitting nearby also noticed Harrison's trembling fat. They looked at the Ruggiamos in their hands in surprise, and then at the Ruggiamos in Harrison's hands. They didn't feel anything different, but why did they only feel a little restless after eating the Ruggiamos? It wasn't as exaggerated as Harrison's. The customers watched Harrison finish the Ruggiamo eagerly. After many swallowing mouthfuls of saliva, Meg finally came out with 5 Ruggiamos and gave one to each customer. They came together, and they were all craving the Ruggiamos. Of course, they didn't care about who ate first. After eating more than 50 kilograms, they were really good friends. Ugly Duckling, watch carefully. It's going to be spectacular when those 6 wintermelons shake. Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms and watched with wide eyes. She also held Ugly Duckling a little higher. Meg, who had just walked to the counter, couldn't help but stop and look back. It wasn't easy to gather 6 customers of the same size, and they all ordered Ruggiamos at the same time. They held the Ruggiamos in their hands and looked at them carefully. They cut them down the middle and stuffed them with minced meat. Although they boasted that they had eaten all over Chaos City, this was the first time they had seen this kind of Ruggiamos. Tempted by the aroma and Harrison's eating style, they all picked up the Ruggiamos and took a bite almost at the same time. Harrison, who had just finished one Ruggiamo, looked at them and smiled. They would love it after tasting it. He took a big bite of the second Ruggiamo. Ah! 6 long exclamations of admiration sounded almost at the same time. Although they weren't very loud, they were surprisingly in tune and attracted a lot of customers' attention. The customers who had tasted Ruggiamos all knew that the sound they made when they swallowed for the first time was completely out of their control. It was the most realistic reaction of the body. It was the feeling that they couldn't control themselves. Therefore, they didn't feel disgusted by it. Instead, they felt like watching others make a fool of themselves like they did. However, the customers who turned their heads around were soon stunned. The 6 customers who had taken big bites of Ruggiamos started to tremble from their calves to their thighs, then to their stomachs and necks. Their fat was trembling like waves. The 6 of them sat close to each other, creating the feeling of waves. The customers wanted to laugh, but they didn't think it was appropriate to laugh out loud, so they had to hold it in. Looking at the huge waves, they couldn't take their eyes off them. The small-eyed man next to them was blushing. If he hadn't been worried that his laughter would be drowned out by the fat people, he would have laughed out loud. It's fun, it's fun. Amy clapped her little hands happily. This was the most interesting reaction she had ever seen. It was so funny that so many soft and fat uncles couldn't control their fat from trembling. Meow. Ugly Duckling raised its little pink paw to cover its eyes. These guys are so scary. This scene is indeed more beautiful than I thought. Zhang Hong couldn't help laughing. He hurriedly turned and walked to the kitchen. Ruggiamos were very effective for customers who were too fat. After the news spread, Ruggiamos would win the favor of a group of foodies. The customers didn't care what others thought of them at all. They were completely immersed in the delicious Ruggiamos. They felt their fat trembling and moving as they experienced unprecedented delicious enjoyment. George slowly put down the bag in his hand, still looking a little unsatisfied. He couldn't help but exclaim, eating delicious food and losing weight at the same time. Only a god could invent such a miraculous food, right? Mr. Mack is indeed a genius. Harrison nodded in agreement. He was 70% full after 2 Ruggiamos. One more, and he would be full. Chapter 76. Mag shook his head with a smile as he listened to the praises outside. Of course, he wasn't a genius. No genius would learn how to make Ruggiamo for 100 days without sleep or rest. He just had the system, and he was more diligent, that's all. However, being able to let the customers eat happily and listen to their praise still made them feel pretty good. This feeling of being recognized was much better than being chased or insulted in the past. This Ruggiamo is so good. Is there anything else in this restaurant other than the rainbow fried rice? While waiting for the second Ruggiamo, George picked up the menu on the table and flipped it open expectantly. To his surprise, there were only 2 dishes on it. When he saw the price, he blurted out, Yangzhou fried rice, 600 copper coins for a plate. Laji Ruggiamo, 300 copper coins. Why is it so expensive? Bro, if we go somewhere else, we won't be able to eat such delicious and weight-loss Ruggiamos even with 10 gold coins. We've made a profit with only 3 gold coins, Harrison said with a smile. Yeah, I'll order 2 more even if it's 30 gold coins, let alone 3 gold coins. The fat man in red nodded and put down the empty bag reluctantly. Bro, aren't you always free to spend money? Why do you think the Ruggiamo is expensive today? The fat man in cyan asked curiously. The others also looked at George with puzzlement. The Ruggiamo was so delicious, and it was on a diet. 300 copper coins for 1 Ruggiamo was a great deal. George was in charge of 2 blacksmith shops, and his daily net income was at least 200 gold coins. Usually, people would rush to pay for the Ruggiamo. It's not that I don't think the Ruggiamo is worth the price. George hurriedly waved his hand and explained awkwardly, it's because my wife is pregnant. She's been paranoid that I've been seeing other women. She only gives me 3 gold coins a day as pocket money. This Ruggiamo costs 3 gold coins, so I can only eat 1. That's why I'm worried. See? Karma will come to you if you keep showing off your wife, the fat man in cyan said with a gloating smile. But I'm more curious. Do you really have other women? Harrison asked with a teasing tone. Do you even need to ask? Sister-in-law already has him completely under her control. He's already guilty of looking at other women outside, so there's no way he's looking for other women. The red-clothed fatty curled his lips, looking as if he had seen through everything. Now I think it was a wise choice to turn down the marriage arranged by my father the day before yesterday. The fat man in cyan nodded happily. All right, you guys don't even have wives. My wife gave birth to 3 sons for me, and she's pregnant now. I know you're all jealous. George smiled proudly. Then it's probably still a son, but you like daughters. Harrison shrugged and exposed him mercilessly. Take back your words. If it's really a son, I'll send all 4 of my sons to chase after you, no matter if it's a daughter or a son. I'll make you feel real despair. George looked at Harrison with a serious expression. Brother, don't be like this. I'll panic. It's a daughter. It must be a daughter in sister-in-law's stomach. Tell those naughty brats of yours to stay away from my daughter in the future. Harrison hurriedly waved his hand in horror. Then you have to show some sincerity. Lend me 10 gold coins first. George reached out his hand to Harrison. All right, you can eat to your heart's content today. I'll pay for you later. We're brothers. Harrison pushed George's hand away with a smile. No, I'm going to bring some back for your sister-in-law. She hasn't had much of an appetite recently. I was going to accompany her at home today, but I heard you say there's something super delicious, so I came to see if there's anything suitable for her. I can't let you pay for it. George was still reaching out his hand with an embarrassed smile. TSK, TSK. Brother, you're such a good man. Sister-in-law treated you so badly, but you still want to bring her good food. Harrison was a little emotional, but he still took out a dragon coin from his money pouch and handed it to George. This is nothing. She almost lost her life when she was giving birth to my eldest son. I already told her not to give birth, but she knew I wanted a daughter, so she gave birth to my second son. The next year, she gave birth to my 3rd son. She's pregnant with my 4th son now. If I don't pamper a wife like her and fool around, I deserve to be struck by lightning. George accepted the dragon coin with a smile. Everyone was silent. They had known each other for years, so they naturally knew these things. Although they often made fun of George for being afraid of his wife, they still respected their sister-in-law. Then you can't bring this Ruggiamo for her. If she eats it, she'll probably go into labor today. That would ruin everything. His Yangzhou fried rice is very good. It's very mild and nourishing. You can bring one for her. Maybe it'll be good for the baby. Harrison nodded. Okay, then I'll bring her a Yangzhou fried rice. Is this the rainbow fried rice that little girl was talking about? George glanced at Amy, who was sitting behind the counter. Yes, but I don't know if the owner will let me take it out. Harrison nodded. He was a little unsure. He could take the Ruggiamo away with him, but it would be a little strange to take the fried rice away with him. Boss, can I take a Yangzhou fried rice away with me? George asked Meg, who came out with the Ruggiamo. Take it out? Meg put the Ruggiamo on the table and was a little surprised. In the past 2 days, there had been customers who were in a hurry to eat Ruggiamos while walking, but none of them had asked to take the Yangzhou fried rice away. If they did, they would have to buy a takeout box from the system. My wife is more than 6 months pregnant, and she doesn't want to eat anything these days. Harrison said the owner's Yangzhou fried rice is very good, so I want to take one back. Maybe she'll eat some. George nodded sincerely, but he was a little nervous. Some restaurants didn't allow customers to take out food. Meg looked at George. He didn't expect him to be a good husband. He always thought that people who loved their wives deserved respect. He asked in his mind, System, can pregnant women eat Yangzhou fried rice? The Yangzhou fried rice provided by the system is non-toxic and harmless. It's suitable for the old, the young, the sick, the disabled, and the young. There's no situation where it's inedible, the system answered calmly. After a short pause, it added, but pregnant women shouldn't eat Laji Ruggiamo. Meg was relieved. He continued, then make me a takeout box. Use the same logo as the one on the Ruggiamo bag. It'd be better if the style is the same. It'd be better if it's all brown. Anyway, it'd be better if it's the kind that people can remember at first sight. Chapter 77. 5 copper coins for the Ruggiamo bag and 10 for the takeout box, Meg said calmly. The system's dissatisfaction? That's not part of the deal. 20 copper coins. The system was silent for a while, and then argued. The host can earn 300 copper coins for a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. Even if you deduct the cost of the takeout box, you still have 280 copper coins left. The system designed the takeout box with the ability of a top designer and the logo with the ability of a top painter. All the materials are pollution-free, self-degrading, and can be used many times. 5 copper coins. Meg casually threw out his new offer, and then said calmly, System, do you believe that he won't be dissatisfied if I tell him to take the plate and leave? And he'll even wash the plate and send it back to me tomorrow? Remember, this is a buyer's market. 300 copper coins is still too little for me. 10 copper coins, deal. The system's crisp voice sounded with a bit of grievance and helplessness. The takeout box is being made. The first batch will be delivered in 5 minutes. Very good. Meg was satisfied with the system's efficiency. He turned to George and said with a smile, Okay, but you'll have to add 20 copper coins to the takeout box. 20 copper coins? Okay, please pack one for me. I won't take my own. George thought for a while, and then nodded. Although other restaurants usually didn't charge extra for takeout, it was still acceptable to add 20 copper coins to the takeout box since a plate of Yangzhou fried rice already cost 600 copper coins. As long as the Yangzhou fried rice was as good as Ruggiamo, and he could let his wife eat more, it wouldn't be a problem to double the price. Please wait a moment. Tang Sanzang nodded, turned around, and went into the kitchen, ignoring the system's roaring voice in his head. He was better at making money than he thought. He was just lazy in his previous life. George and the others continued to eat the second Ruggiamo, enjoying the delicious taste and the feeling of fat exercise. This slightly spicy meat wave also attracted the attention of the customers who had just entered the restaurant. However, the happy and enjoyable expressions on their faces seemed to be magnified by their chubby faces. They were like a living advertisement, making everyone curious about what kind of delicacy could make them eat so happily. Although they felt that the price of 300 copper coins per serving was a little expensive, they still couldn't help but order a serving. For a moment, Many new customers who had just entered the restaurant for the first time were attracted. 5 minutes later, the system notified him that the takeout box was ready. Meg, who was cooking the Yangzhou fried rice, looked back and saw a bigger iron box beside the Rujiamo bag. A stack of brown wooden boxes were neatly stacked inside. Meg turned off the stove and walked over to pick up one of the boxes. The box was as thick as a cardboard shell, but very hard. It was also inlaid with a layer of transparent plastic, which looked very fresh and clean. He didn't need to worry about the soup leaking out. The words Amy's were printed in golden letters on the lid of the box, and below it was an outline of Amy's lovely back. In the lower right corner of the box was a row of small words with the restaurant's address. It looked very delicate and simple. If it weren't for the fact that the box was a bit too thin, it could have been used as a regular bowl. Not bad. It suits the atmosphere of the restaurant very well. Meg nodded with satisfaction. The workmanship and quality of the food produced by the system were excellent. 10 copper coins did seem a bit excessive. Of course, he didn't feel guilty at all. The system had agreed so quickly, so obviously there was still money to be made. Besides, there was no word Yangzhou fried rice on the box, so if he needed anything to take out in the future, he could just put it in the box. Mag put the fried rice in the pot into a box. The colorful fried rice still looked as beautiful as it was in the box. 1 Rujiamo and 1 Yangzhou fried rice, Mag said as he placed a Rujiamo and a Yangzhou fried rice in front of George. Here's 1 Rujiamo and 1 Yangzhou fried rice. Okay, thank you. George's eyes lit up as he looked at the delicate wooden box in front of him. Normally, a restaurant would give customers something like a crudely made earthen jar, but this wooden box looked as if it had been carefully made by a craftsman. If he didn't know better, he would have thought it was a gift box. Such an exquisite box was only sold for 20 copper coins. The boss must have paid for it himself, right? George had thought it was a little expensive, but now he felt he had gotten a great deal. Besides, his wife might be in a better mood after seeing such delicately packaged food. He couldn't wait to bring it back for her to try. Yangzhou fried rice and Rujiamo should be eaten while they're hot. Besides, Laji Rujiamo is not suitable for pregnant women. Meg reminded George, who was holding the Rujiamo in one hand and preparing to pick up the Yangzhou fried rice cautiously. Okay, Mag. I'll pay for this Yangzhou fried rice and Rujiamo first. They'll pay for the other 2 Rujiamos later. George nodded. He took out the dragon coin and was about to hand it to Mag when Mag stopped him. Mr. Mac, it's all on me, Harrison said. 9 gold coins in total. Amy came over with Ugly Duckling in her arms and a gold coin in her little hand. George put the dragon coin in Amy's hand and put the gold coin away. He smiled at Amy and said, "You're a good helper. I have a little brother who's about your age at home. I'll bring him to play with you next time. I like little girls. Too bad you don't have one." Amy took the dragon coin and shook her head. The smile on George's face froze. He suddenly felt a little hurt, and he didn't know what to say. Ha ha ha. His friends burst into laughter. Meg also couldn't help laughing. Amy did like to play with little girls, but her answer was a little too straightforward. Maybe I will this time. Goodbye, Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac. George calmed himself down and regained his confidence. He said to Harrison, "I'll go take the food to your sister-in-law. Next time, it'll be my treat." Harrison waved his hand and smiled. "Go ahead, but I think from tomorrow on, you'll have to line up every day to buy food for your sister-in-law." "I agree." The fatty and Cyan nodded. "How nice would it be if I could eat all kinds of delicious food at home without going out?" The fatty in red sighed as he watched George walk out with the fried rice carefully in his hands. "You can't afford to hire a chef like Mr. Mac," the fatty in green mocked. The fatty in red shook his head. "No, I mean, if you could find someone to bring the food to our house, I'd be happy to pay extra." Chapter 78. The bag of Rujiamo is 5 copper coins, so the takeout box is 10 copper coins, Mag said calmly. The system's dissatisfaction? That's not part of the deal. 20 copper coins. The system was silent for a while, and then it argued. A plate of Yangzhou fried rice earns a net profit of 300 copper coins. Even after deducting the cost of the takeout box of 20 copper coins, there's still a net profit of 280 copper coins. The system designs the box with the ability of a top designer, and then designs the logo with the ability of a top painter. All the materials are pollution-free, self-degradable, and reusable. 5 copper coins. Mag threw out his new offer casually, and then calmly said, "System, do you believe that he won't be dissatisfied if I ask him to take the plate and leave? And he'll wash the plate and bring it back to me tomorrow? Remember, this is a buyer's market. I think 300 copper coins is a little too little." 10 copper coins. Deal. The system's crisp voice sounded, with a little frustration and helplessness. The takeout box is being made. The first batch will be available in 5 minutes. Very good. Mag was very satisfied with the efficiency of the system. He turned to George with a smile and said, "Okay, but you'll have to pay an extra 20 copper coins for takeout." 20 copper coins? Okay, please pack one for me. I don't need my own. George thought for a while, and then nodded. Normally, other restaurants wouldn't charge extra for takeout, but since a plate of Yangzhou fried rice already cost 600 copper coins, it wasn't hard to accept an extra 20 copper coins for takeout. As long as the Yangzhou fried rice was as good as the Rujiamo and could make his wife eat more, it wouldn't be a problem to double the price. Please wait a moment. Tang Sanzang nodded and went into the kitchen, ignoring the roaring of the system in his head. He was better at making money than he had imagined. He was just lazy in his previous life. George and the others continued to eat the second Rujiamo, enjoying the delicious taste and the fat movement. The fleshy meat also attracted the attention of the customers who had just entered the restaurant. However, the joyful and enjoyable expressions on everyone's faces seemed to be magnified by their chubby faces, making them wonder what kind of delicacy could make them eat so happily. Although they felt that the price of 300 copper coins per serving was a little expensive, they couldn't help but order one. For a moment, many new customers who entered the restaurant for the first time were attracted by the delicacy. 5 minutes later, the system told them that the food boxes were ready. Mag, who was making Yangzhou fried rice, looked back and saw a slightly bigger iron box next to the iron box with the bag of Rujiamo, in which a stack of brown wooden boxes was neatly arranged. Mag turned off the fire and walked over to pick up one of the boxes. The box was as thick as cardboard, but it was quite hard, and the inside was inlaid with a layer of transparent plastic. It looked very fresh and clean, and he didn't have to worry about the soup leaking out. The words, "Mamie Restaurant," were printed on the lid of the box in golden letters, and Amy's lovely back was sketched at the bottom. There was a row of small words in the lower right corner with the restaurant's address written on it. It looked very delicate and simple. If the box hadn't been so thin, it could have been used as a rice bowl. Mag nodded with satisfaction. Not bad. It suits the restaurant very well. The craftsmanship and quality of the system's products were excellent. 10 copper coins was indeed a little too much. Of course, he didn't feel guilty at all. The system had agreed so readily, so obviously, there was money to be made. Besides, the words Yangzhou fried rice weren't printed on the box, so he could put anything he needed to take out in this box in the future. Mag put the fried rice in the pan into the box. The colorful fried rice didn't look any less beautiful in the box. A Rujiamo and a Yangzhou fried rice. Please hold them facing up. Mag placed a Rujiamo and a plate of Yangzhou fried rice in front of George. George shook his head. That's right. Okay. Thank you. George's eyes lit up as he looked at the delicate wooden box in front of him. Normally, a big bag in a restaurant would be a roughly made earthen jar or something. But this wooden box seemed to have been specially made by a craftsman. If he didn't know better, he would think it was a gift box. For such a beautiful box to be sold for only 20 copper coins, the owner must have paid for it himself, right? George had thought it was a little expensive, but now he felt he had gotten a great bargain. Besides, his wife might be in a better mood when she saw such delicately packaged food. He couldn't wait to take it home for her to try. Yangzhou fried rice and Rujiamo are better when they're hot. Besides, Rujiamo is not suitable for pregnant women. Mag reminded George, who was holding the Rujiamo in one hand and was about to pick up the Yangzhou fried rice cautiously. Okay, Mag. I'll pay for this plate of Yangzhou fried rice and Rujiamo first. They'll pay for the other 2 Rujiamos later. George nodded and handed the dragon coin to Mag. Boss Mag, put it all on me, Harrison said from the side. 9 gold coins. Amy came over with ugly duckling in her arms, a gold coin in her little hand. George put the dragon coin into Amy's hand, then put away the gold coin, and said with a smile, "You're such a good helper. I have a little brother who's about the same age as you at home. I'll bring him over to play with you next time." Amy took the dragon coin and shook her head. "I like little girls. It's a pity you don't have any." George's smile froze on his face. He suddenly felt a little hurt and didn't know what to say. Ha ha ha. His buddies at the side burst into laughter. Mag couldn't help but chuckle. It was true that Amy liked to play with little girls and big sisters, but her answer was a little too straightforward. "Maybe she will this time." By Mag, little boss. George collected himself and regained his confidence. "I'm going to bring food to your sister-in-law. It's my treat next time," he said to Harrison and the others. "Go ahead. But I think from tomorrow on, you'll have to line up to buy food for your sister-in-law every day," Harrison said with a smile, waving his hand. The fatty in cyan nodded. "I agree. How nice it would be if we could eat all kinds of delicious food at home without going out." The fatty in red sighed as he watched George carefully walk out with the fried rice. "Your family can't afford a chef like Mag," the fatty in green teased. The fatty in red shook his head. "No. I mean, if boss can find someone to bring food to our house, I'll be happy to pay a little more." Chapter 79. Really? Amy looked at Meg and asked uncertainly. "Of course it's true." Meg nodded seriously. At the same time, he asked in his mind, "System, you should have all kinds of children's toys in your inventory, right?" As the god of cookery cultivation system, the system will never have children's toys, the system replied righteously. "Okay, then I'll take the gold coins and buy them on the street later." Meg did not hesitate at all. "Well?" The system's voice sounded a little hesitant. It hesitated for a moment before saying, "Although there is no inventory, the system's offline toy production line still exists. If the host needs any toys, the system can customize them in 5 minutes and deliver them to your door for free. The price is fair." "Let's see the price later." The corners of Meg's mouth curled up, but his voice was still calm. He then looked at Amy and said with a smile, "Tell me, what kind of toy does Amy want? Father will conjure it for you." Amy tilted her head and thought for a while. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she said, "I want a little person who can sing." "System, you don't sell human beings, do you?" The first thing that flashed through Meg's mind was the Little Kingdom. He asked subconsciously. Selling human beings violates the second law of the system set by the heavenly axiom. Once violated, the system will be reset and the host will be directly obliterated. The system's serious voice sounded. It even sounded a little like a synthesized mechanical voice, without the slightest emotion or room for negotiation. "Don't be nervous. I just mentioned it casually. Then let's make a beautiful music box." Meg originally wanted to ask if he could make a thumbelina, but it seemed that human trafficking was the system's bottom line. He swallowed his words and thought about it. It seemed that the heavenly axiom also added some restrictive laws to the system. This reminded Meg of the 3 laws of robotics. This was not a bad thing. It meant that the system's behavior was still within the scope of restrictions. It would not collapse after the system developed self-awareness. Of course, Meg was already thinking about how to slowly pry those so-called laws out of the system's mouth. The system was such a high-end tool, so naturally, he had to understand it well before he could use it happily. With his current strength, he might not even be able to defeat a normal human, let alone a beast man or a demon. Every time something happened, he would hide behind Amy's back. Although it was quite satisfying, he still felt a little uncomfortable inside. As a father, being able to stand in front of his daughter and shield her from all the storms was the most comfortable state. Of course, he was also working hard to earn money to buy his physical fitness points. By the time he was able to wield a sword, he would be able to deal with most of the problems with the high-end swordsmanship techniques in his mind. After all, Meg Alex was a magical man who could slay dragons. As long as he had a sword in his hand, he was not afraid of anyone. In the process of earning strength points, It would be good if he could obtain more defensive and life-saving items from the system. That way, he would feel safer. The system can provide 500 mainstream music boxes. The prices range from 50 copper coins to 500 gold coins. The host can choose to purchase them. The system's voice once again sounded like an experienced businessman. Meg looked at the hundreds of pictures that appeared in his mind. The music box that cost 500 gold coins was made of pure gold. There was a little golden figure standing in the gold box, full of the aura of a nouveau riche. This was definitely not the type that Amy would like. Looking down, his eyes stopped at a music box with a price tag of 50 gold coins. It was a brown wooden box with a hemispherical glass ball on the outside. In the middle of it was a blonde elf girl in a purple dress. There was a violin around her neck. The workmanship was extremely exquisite. There was a layer of fine white snowflakes on the ground. It looked like it could simulate the scene of snowflakes fluttering in the air. There were also 50 songs on loop. The price was quite reasonable. System, I want that 50 gold coin violin girl music box. Hurry up and order it, Meg said directly. Host, are you sure you want to pay? The system seemed to be a little suspicious. After all, Meg had just haggled with it over the 10 copper coins for the takeout box. Now, he wanted a music box that cost 50 gold coins without batting an eyelid. Nonsense. If the purpose of earning money is not to spend it on Amy, then it's meaningless. Meg saw through the system's thoughts and urged, 5 minutes. If it's not ready, I'll apply for a refund. Music box order in progress. Ready in 5 minutes. Payment has been deducted, the system replied, and then fell silent. The conversation with the system and the purchase were all in his mind. With Meg's swift and decisive personality, he bought it in less than a minute. So, in Amy's eyes, he seemed to be thinking. She felt that her request was a little too much, so she shook her head and said softly, Father, Amy doesn't want a singing villain. As long as it's something from Father, Amy will like it very much. Meg looked at the sensible Amy. Sometimes, he wanted her to be a little more willful. She was so sensible that it made his heart ache. He smiled and shook his head, saying, No, Father wants to make a singing villain for you. It's going to be a very beautiful one, but it'll take a while. There's a little delay in the magic. Really? Amy's eyes lit up. She was looking forward to it. A singing villain? It must be very fun. She had a lot of faith in her father's words. He said that he would make a beautiful house for her, and then there was the beautiful restaurant. He said that he would make a beautiful dress for her, and now the dress she changed into every morning was very beautiful. Father had done everything he said. Meg nodded, and then said seriously, Well, while we're waiting, I have one last question. If other children say that they like Amy, how will you respond? This was probably a question that every father who had a precious daughter would want to ask. If the cabbage that he had carefully planted was eaten by a pig, of course he wouldn't be happy. Although Amy was only 4 years old and was still young, this kind of thing naturally had to be taught from a young age. Before she reached adulthood, before she had a complete worldview and was able to distinguish right from wrong, he would extinguish the flames that tried to get close to him. This was also an important reason why he wanted to recover his strength. With a father who could slay dragons, when those people wanted to make him their father-in-law, they would first consider whether they could handle the heavy sword in his hand. Chapter 80. Meg nodded in satisfaction at Amy's answer. This was the most reassuring answer he had heard at this age. For a little girl who had no concept of love, he was quite happy to have her rely on him. As for when she grew up, if any Tom, Dick, or Harry tried to get close to Amy, he would have to break their legs. There was nothing to be reasoned with. This was the responsibility of a father, and for now, he did not want to consider what kind of man to entrust her to. Meg felt a lot more relieved after giving her 3 preventive shots. However, he really did not have much experience in raising a child. If he encountered any problems in the future, he would slowly deal with them as he saw fit. Meg thought for a moment, then looked at Amy and said, Oh, Amy, when you call me father, you don't have to add the word person behind it. You can add the word person in formal situations, or when you have a more serious conversation. You can just call me father normally. To Amy, Meg was the most important person she could rely on. He was also the only harbor that could shelter her from the wind and rain. Therefore, in the past, she had added the suffix Lord to give him a sense of respect and formality. However, because of this, she also felt a little distant from him. He had felt this way before, but at that time, Amy still had a little inferiority complex. Meg was worried that it would burden her, so he held it in and did not say anything. Now that she had completely recovered the self-confidence that a child her age should have, it was a good idea to bring it up naturally while the atmosphere of the conversation was still good. Of course, Meg was more looking forward to Amy calling him Dad. However, the term Dad did not exist in this world, so it would probably be a little inappropriate for Amy to call him that. Therefore, he could only settle for the next best thing, which was to call him Father. Father. Amy looked at Meg, a little puzzled. In her heart, whether it was in the past or now, her father was omnipotent. He was the most powerful person in the world, so she felt that father was the best way to address him. She hoped that he would always be that adult who loved and cared for her. But now, looking at her father's expression, it seemed that he did not like her calling him that. Without the word Lord, it seemed to be more intimate. Amy was conflicted for a while, but she still looked at Tang Xuanzong and nodded. Okay, father. Well, it's okay. You'll get used to it slowly. Meg smiled and stroked Amy's hair. It was obviously impossible for Amy to completely change in such a short period of time, but it was a good thing that she was slowly changing. He wanted to become closer to Amy and become someone she could completely trust and rely on. System notification. The music box has been completed in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It has been delivered to the second cabinet at the counter. The system can include a gift packaging service. Do you want it? At this moment, the system's voice sounded. Of course. Meg didn't even think about it. Opening the package and opening the gift box were both delightful things. A good package was also a form of respect for the gift. Of course, the most important thing was that this was a free gift from the system. This stingy system actually took the initiative to provide this service for the first time, which made him a little curious. All right, Meg, if you obediently remember Father's words today, then Father will give you a present, all right? Meg smiled. Is it a little person who can sing? Amy's eyes lit up. That's right. Meg nodded. Although it wasn't a living little person, that music box was definitely a unique toy in this world. Little Amy will remember everything, Father, Amy said happily, but after realizing that she had said something wrong, she forced herself to swallow the last word. Meow, ugly duckling, who had been circling around the chair countless times, sat on the ground and looked up at the two of them with a resentful expression. Be good, ugly duckling. Father said he's going to give us a little person who can sing. Amy jumped down from Meg's lap and squatted down to pick up Ugly Duckling. She rubbed its head as she spoke. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling enjoyed Amy's touch and looked at Meg with curiosity. It also seemed to be very interested in the little person who could sing. After hearing the system's notification that the packaging was complete, Meg got up and walked over to the counter. He bent down to take a look and saw that there was a gift box wrapped in purple paper in the second cabinet. There was even a big bow on the outside of the gift box. It really did look like a little girl's heart. He was quite satisfied with it. Amy and Ugly Duckling looked at Meg expectantly, imagining what kind of singing little person it would be. Meg reached out and took out the gift box. It was quite comfortable in his hand, but it didn't seem too heavy. He turned around and showed it to Amy with a smile. Wow, what a beautiful box. Father, is the singing little person hidden inside? Amy's eyes lit up as she walked up to him. You'll know when you open the gift box. This is Father's gift to you. Meg smiled as he placed the box on the counter. He didn't care that the little one had forgotten to change the way she addressed him in her excitement. Okay. Amy climbed onto the high stool and carefully placed Ugly Duckling on the counter. She stared at the purple gift box for a while before looking up at Meg with a conflicted expression. Father, this box is too beautiful. I can't bear to tear it open. Meg smiled. He didn't expect that such a beautiful gift box would bring such trouble to Amy. He patted her head with a smile and said, the box is beautiful, but it's only used to hold gifts. The singing little person in the box is waiting for our Amy to become good friends with her. She must be very scared to be locked up in the box alone. Okay, I'll save her right now. Amy's eyes immediately became resolute upon hearing that. She looked at the box with an apologetic expression and said, "I'm sorry, box. I'm going to tear it open and save the little person." Under Meg's guidance, Amy successfully tore open the wrapping paper. Then, she carefully picked up the box with the lid turned upside down, revealing the music box inside. The brown wooden base looked extraordinary, and there were two beautiful Chinese redbud flowers carved on it. A hemispherical glass cover was connected to the base, and there was a 10-centimeter tall blonde fairy in the center. She had long eyelashes and bright eyes, and she looked very lifelike. Every string of the violin on her shoulder could even be seen. There was a layer of white foam on the floor, which looked like snow. The workmanship was exquisite, and it was completely worthy of the price of 5,000 copper coins. Wow, what a beautiful little fairy! Mi's eyes sparkled like little stars as she stared at the little elf in the box with her big blue eyes. Meow, meow, ugly duckling also crawled over and tilted its little head to look at the little person inside. Its eyes were filled with curiosity, and it raised its little paw to touch it. However, when it saw Amy, it didn't dare to reach out. It looked a little funny and adorable. Chapter 81. Meg shook his head with a smile. Sure enough, all otakus in any world like takeout. He used to eat at restaurants, but he would order takeout once or twice. However, in order to avoid being sent razor blades if his address was leaked, he wouldn't complain on Weibo when he ordered takeout. Also, because of the time delay, takeout food was not as good as the freshly cooked food in restaurants. It was unfair to comment on takeout food like that. Although he was a little sharp-tongued, he didn't want to comment on a restaurant. After all, he was lazy, which was why he didn't like takeout. Besides, modern takeout mainly relied on instant information exchange. Whether it was through phone calls or direct orders through various takeout apps, the deal could only be reached after the buyer and the seller had communicated. The technology on the Norland continent wasn't that advanced, so this problem couldn't be solved in a short time. Besides, he didn't want to expand his takeout business recently. The most important thing now was to increase the number of customers. The task of 1,000 customers was imminent. Mag murmured to himself as he went into the kitchen. If you really want to deliver food, those unemployed knights would be good candidates. They have their own means of transportation, and they are usually more familiar with the streets of Chaos City. The restaurant was busy until the end of the opening hours. Meg calmly turned down the requests of several customers who had just entered the restaurant. They had sold out of Rugiamos, and he was indeed a little tired. Phew. Mag closed the door and heaved a long sigh of relief. He sat down on a chair at the side. "Father, we sold 96 Rugiamos and 24 plates of Yangzhou fried rice for lunch today," Amy said happily to Mag, holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. "That's 432 gold coins. That's a lot." Meg was also a little surprised. The turnover at noon was more than 400 gold coins. After deducting the cost of ingredients, the net profit was more than 200 gold coins. In the morning, the net profit was more than 100 gold coins. In the evening, as long as the number of Rugiamos could keep up with the 4-hour opening hours, the income would probably double again. What made Meg even happier was that there were 40 new customers for lunch. This speed of growth made him see the possibility of 1,000 customers in 15 days. Father's rainbow fried rice and Rugiamos are so delicious that they can't help wanting to eat them. Amy nodded. She squatted down and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. Then she walked up to Meg and said softly, "Father, let me massage your back. Thank you for your hard work." Amy stood on her tiptoes and massaged his shoulders and back with her little fists. She was still small, so it was a little strenuous, but she still tried very hard to give him a good back massage. Meg smiled and lowered his shoulders, enjoying his daughter's massage. Although Amy was a little sharp-tongued in front of others, she was still a well-behaved daughter in front of him. As for her sharp-tongued tongue, it seemed to be hereditary. There was nothing he could do about it. He could only ask the customers to be more tolerant. "Okay, Amy, give me a back massage, and I won't have to work so hard." Meg lifted Amy up with a smile. She sat on his lap, and he reached out to pinch her soft little face. Amy's face had become more and more rosy after her diet had improved. She changed into clean new clothes every day and showered and washed her hair often. The wild child who used to run around in rags had completely become a little princess. However, if she were to become a little princess, then there would be all kinds of people with ill intentions trying to spy on her. As such, Mag decided to teach her some basic anti-deception education. Otherwise, what would he do if his innocent and adorable girl were to be kidnapped by someone else one day? Crassus came again at noon today, but there were many people eating in the restaurant at that time. Meg was busy cooking and entertaining the customers, and Amy was busy collecting money, so he sat there for more than an hour without saying much to the father and daughter. In the end, he silently ate 2 bowls of Yangzhou fried rice and was asked to leave the restaurant by Meg again with the excuse that business hours were over. Meg, of course, did it on purpose. This guy wanted to bring Amy to the big hole in the Magus Tower, and Meg was very against it. Even after Meg had clearly rejected him, this guy still insisted on coming to see him. It was already very nice of Meg not to put him on the blacklist. Meg looked at Amy and said with a smile, "Amy, I'm going to ask you some questions and what I'm going to say to you. You have to think carefully before you answer, and then remember everything I say in your heart, okay?" "Okay." Amy nodded obediently, but she looked at Meg with a little confusion. What was her father going to say? His expression was so serious and serious. If a stranger told you that he wanted to bring you to eat something delicious, how would you answer? Meg looked into Amy's eyes and asked, "Okay." Amy's eyes lit up, and she clapped her little hands. Meg's face darkened. The answer was exactly as he had expected. A foodie had no resistance to delicious food, but he still shook his head with a straight face and said, "That's not right. Amy, you have to remember that strangers won't really bring you to eat delicious food. Besides, is there anything better than Father's cooking?" "That's right. Father's cooking is the best." Amy nodded. After hesitating for a while, her eyes lit up and she said, "Then the next time someone tells me that, I'll let him eat at our restaurant. That way, I can even charge him for the food." This way of solving the problem is really invincible. Meg raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but want to praise Amy. The teacher who came up with the question probably didn't expect such a thing. He then asked the second question, "If someone tells you that he wants to bring you to have fun, okay." Amy immediately nodded happily, looking like she wanted to set off right away. No, that's not how you answer." Meg quickly shook his head. It seemed that Amy, who was at the age where she was active, really wanted to go out and have fun. However, this question was very important. Otherwise, it would be too easy to be abducted. Chapter 82. After putting Amy and Ugly Duckling on the bed and tucking them in, Meg went downstairs to prepare the ingredients for the evening. When he passed by the counter, he put the music box in the cupboard. It was a great tool for lulling little girls to sleep. Meg was going to make 128 Ruggiamos tonight. It would take him 2 hours to knead the dough, which was why Meg was eager to improve his strength. If he could improve his strength by 0.5, the kneading time would be reduced by at least half. As he kneaded the dough, Meg began to think about his next plan. Although he and Amy were living a happy and warm life, as a father, he wanted to make sure his daughter could live a better life. The restaurant was the foundation of his survival now and in the future. It could make him earn money as well as others' recognition and respect, which made him very happy. The restaurant was slowly getting on track, and new customers were joining every day. Although it wasn't full yet, it was enough for him to keep busy. His next goal was to sell 1,000 Ruggiamos and then unlock the tofu pudding to add one more dish to the menu. According to his current progress, he should be able to finish the task in 2 days. At the thought of the tofu pudding, Meg felt a little hungry. Even kneading the dough felt a lot more energetic. "Father." After Meg finished making the dough, Amy came downstairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She stood at the door and called out. Ugly Duckling grabbed her little skirt and slid down by itself. Although it had only been a few days since it was born, the little guy's vitality was quite good. It seemed to have endless energy after waking up. It jumped left and right in the kitchen and played very happily by itself. Sit down for a while. I'll get you a glass of water. Meg looked back at Amy with a smile. When he was about to get the glass of water, Ugly Duckling suddenly bumped into his foot and froze. It looked up at Meg in a daze, and then fell back stiffly. It lay on all fours, motionless. It looked back at Amy with its watery eyes full of grievance. Is this a scam? Mag couldn't help but chuckle when he saw that. This little fellow was such a drama queen. Instead of being a boss, he started his acting career. Amy looked at Ugly Duckling with a serious expression and said, Ugly Duckling, I saw you bump into Father's foot. If you want to lie down, then lie down. If you get dirty, then I won't hold you anymore. Meow. Ugly Duckling got up with a start and gave Meg a resentful look. It trotted to Amy's feet and rubbed against her calf. Meg poured a glass of water for Amy, and she went to play with the music box with Ugly Duckling. She must have inherited her mother's talent for music. She could hum after listening to the music a few times. It seemed that she would be able to learn it in a couple of days. Her soft voice sounded very cute. Meg looked at the time. It was only 4:30, but there were already customers walking back and forth outside the restaurant. They looked into the restaurant from time to time, trying to find Meg. People knocked on the door from time to time, but Meg chose to ignore them. Opening hours hadn't started yet, and he wanted to rest for a while after kneading the dough. Besides, he had to cook dinner for himself later. There was already a line at the door. There were about 7 or 8 people waiting. Some were quite calm, while others were a little anxious. Why isn't the door open yet? I've been hungry since noon, so I came here early to eat Ruggiamo. A young man paced back and forth in front of the door. He wanted to knock on the door, but he drew back his hand halfway. Someone had already knocked twice, but there was no response from inside. Crassus, who was standing in the line, said slowly, Don't worry. Mr. Mac is a punctual person. If he says the door opens at 5, he won't open it 1 minute earlier. If he says the door closes at 9, he won't open it 1 minute later. Young man, be patient and wait in line. Crassus was smiling broadly, but his tone was a little bitter. He was a 10th-tier magic caster, but now he had to wait in line at the door of a restaurant every day. If this spread back to Luo City, it would be big news. If the Yangzhou fried rice wasn't so delicious, and if that little girl's talent hadn't been discovered yet, this would never happen, Crassus thought to himself. Luckily, he hadn't come out for more than a decade. Even in Chaos City, few people could recognize him, so he didn't lose all his face. It's not a big deal to come early to eat Mr. Mac's Ruggiamo. You won't be able to eat it in another restaurant. Harrison, who was standing in the back, chuckled. He had made an appointment with his buddies to come in the evening, but they all had something to do. He also had something to do in the evening, so he came early to line up. It wouldn't be too late to leave after eating. Harrison, why are you here so early? Where are the others? A horse-drawn carriage stopped and George, who had just gotten off, came over. He looked at Harrison in surprise. They all have something to do, so they can't come tonight. I have something to do at home, too, so I came early to eat before going back, Harrison explained. Then he looked at George and asked curiously, How was the Yangzhou fried rice I brought back for your wife at noon? Here's the dragon coin from noon. George took out a dragon coin and handed it to Harrison. He smiled and said, She's more than satisfied. She hasn't eaten anything for days, and she finished the entire plate of Yangzhou fried rice without leaving a single grain of rice behind. She even said that it wasn't enough, so she asked me to buy another plate for her tonight. From now on, she'll have this for all 3 meals a day. That's all thanks to Boss Mac. You're going to be financially liberated again, right? Harrison accepted the money without any hesitation and patted George on the shoulder. George nodded with a smile. That's true, but I'm afraid I won't have time to drink and play with you for a while. I'll stay at home with my wife after I bring her food. Okay, I'll drink for you. Harrison nodded. Meg rested for a while and then made 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice. At the same time, he put the baiji bread on the table. During the meal, Ugly Duckling looked at them with puppy eyes. It looked so pitiful that Meg almost couldn't help but give it some Yangzhou fried rice and Ruggiamo. But before he could say anything, Amy teased it and made it turn its face away. It was 5 o'clock when Meg finished clearing the table. He opened the door and couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. Chapter 83. The long line in front of the restaurant attracted the attention of many passers-by. This corner of the Aden Square was mostly filled with magic potion shops, weapon shops, and other shops that sold strange things. Therefore, few people would come here unless they needed something or were just taking a walk. They had never seen such a long line in front of any shop. So many people came to take a look out of curiosity. They were confused when they saw the luxurious restaurant and the expectant faces of the customers standing in front of the door. What on earth is this restaurant selling? How dare they leave so many customers outside? Of course, what was even more surprising was that these customers just stood there quietly. 2 or 3 people who were familiar with each other would whisper a few words to each other. There wasn't too much impatience or anxiety, which was a little different from the noisy atmosphere of other restaurants. This atmosphere and sense of anticipation made some onlookers stop in their tracks. Although they didn't join the long line, they chose to stay. They wanted to see if this restaurant really had extraordinary delicacies. When Meg opened the door, he was surprised to see the long line in front of the restaurant. He didn't expect so many customers to come early, and it had successfully attracted more than 20 onlookers. Although not all of them would become customers, at least it would increase the possibility of customers coming in at night. "Mr. Mack, you finally opened the door. I've been waiting for half an hour," the young man standing in the front row said with a bit of bitterness, but more joy in his eyes. "The restaurant opens and closes according to the business schedule. You can take a look and choose your own time to dine here. Now, please come in," Mag said with a smile as he opened the door inwards. There was no apologetic expression on his face. He wouldn't spoil the customers when it came to business hours. They had to have enough time to rest and prepare. And once this rule was broken, the opening would be extended and brought forward endlessly, which was the last thing he wanted to see. He still wanted to take a day off the day after tomorrow. "I know. It's the restaurant's rule. Give me 2 Lagi Ruggiamos," the young man said with a nod as he walked in. Although he felt that Mag was a little unreasonable in this regard, he didn't even open the door to let them, who had arrived early, in first when he saw Mag and Amy eating in the restaurant. However, for the sake of the delicious food, he could only choose to forgive him. After all, if he were to go to another restaurant, he wouldn't be able to eat such delicious food even if he stood at the entrance for a whole day. Crassus walked to the door and smiled at Meg as he said, "Mr. Mack, I'll let you think about that. Dear customer, please go ahead and order. Don't block the customers behind you," Meg said with a smile, interrupting Crassus. His smile was impeccable, and his reason was equally justified. "All right." Crassus swallowed the rest of his words and could only walk into the restaurant with his staff. His eyes lit up again when he saw Amy playing with Ugly Duckling on the counter. He quickly walked to the table under the counter and sat down. He looked at Amy with a smile and said, "Hello, little girl." "White-bearded grandpa, hello." Amy looked up at Crassus and also greeted him. She stared at the staff in his hand, which had a sapphire embedded at the top, and curiously asked, "Is that a staff? The kind that every magic caster must have?" "Yes, and this isn't an ordinary staff. Apart from casting magic, it's actually a melee weapon. I used it to knock the head of a giant dragon back in the day." Crassus gently stroked the staff in his hand with a smile. He suddenly missed the days when he was young and fearless. The nickname of the mad magic caster seemed to have been forgotten by everyone now. "Then you're awesome." Amy stared at the sapphire on the staff and said absent-mindedly. Her interest was clearly focused on the sapphire that was glowing under the light. Crassus, who had wanted to brag about how he was back in the day, suddenly felt like he had punched cotton when he saw Amy's uninterested face. He smiled awkwardly and didn't continue. However, now that he had found a chance to talk to Amy face to face, Crassus wasn't in a hurry. The little girl was interested in many things, and as long as he could find something that piqued her interest, he would definitely be able to trick her. He looked back at Meg, who was walking in, and said, "Mr. Mack, I want 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice. Serve them separately." "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and went into the kitchen. He had just given Amy a lesson at noon, and now Crassus was sitting here with bad intentions, trying to trick Amy into becoming his disciple. It was a good opportunity to test the results. If there were any mistakes, he would continue to make up for it tonight. All the people in line at the restaurant's entrance had entered, but the restaurant was still not full. This was the advantage of a restaurant. There were 16 square tables for 4 people, which could accommodate 64 customers at the same time. However, most of the customers who didn't know each other sat down alone. Few people would share a table. When there were more customers in the future, this kind of treatment might not be available anymore. Sharing tables was inevitable. Many of the onlookers at the entrance came in driven by curiosity. However, many of them shook their heads and left after seeing that there were only 2 dishes on the menu, and that the price was extremely high. The owner must be crazy about money. Most of the customers who left because of the price thought so. A plate of unknown Yangzhou fried rice cost 600 copper coins, which was several days' salary for many people. Of course, there were also some customers who were not shy in their pockets who chose to sit down first. However, they were not in a hurry to order. They wanted to see what kind of food was served after other people's orders, and then decide whether to order a plate or not. "Mr. Mac, I brought my own chair. May I come in?" At this moment, a loud voice came from outside the restaurant. The door was pushed open, and a demon's head stuck in. Many of the customers who turned around were surprised, and some of the timid ones were a little scared. Lava demons were famous for their bad tempers, and this one didn't look like a good-tempered one at all. "Big bald guy. Don't make so much noise, or I'll burn you with a fireball," Amy said to Sargeras, who was standing at the door, with a straight face. It was not good to praise someone in the restaurant in such a way that he scared them. Sargeras was scared right away. He still remembered the stinging pain when the small fireball hit him this morning. Besides, he had done a whole day's worth of guild tasks and earned 9 gold coins just to eat Rugiamo. Of course, he didn't want to cause trouble. He lowered his voice and said, "Mr. Mac." Mag couldn't help but want to laugh at the sight of a lava demon being tamed into a little lamb. He didn't think that the lava demon would bring his own chair. He was probably shocked by the chair that cost 10 gold coins in the morning. He walked to the kitchen door and nodded as he said, "Sure, come in." Chapter 84. Sargeras stared at the Crassus and swallowed the rest of his words. He shrunk his head and sat down obediently. That year outside Rodu, he had seen a magic caster defeat a giant dragon with a fireball spell, and that magic caster was going to knock the dragon's head with his magic caster's staff. That magic caster in a white robe was sitting there, waiting for his food to be served. Sargeras could only see the side of his face, but he recognized him at once. He was still in awe of powerful humans. Although he believed that he would be able to fight a dragon after fully awakening and obtaining the sacred gear, he was still far from that goal. In the future, he would have to accept guild quests every day to earn money to eat Rugiamos. This restaurant owner is really something. Even such a powerful magic caster comes to eat in his restaurant, Sargeras thought to himself. He felt lucky that he didn't act rashly this morning. He looked at Meg and said, "Mr. Mac, I'd like 3 Rugiamos." After eating Rugiamos in the morning, Sargeras only had a few wild fruits in the swamp for lunch. Killing a dozen poison arrow frogs had consumed a lot of his strength, and he was starving now. But the reward for today's mission was a little low. It wasn't enough for him to eat. He had to go to the guild early tomorrow to accept a mission with a higher reward. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded. Sargeras moved his chair to the side. The chair he brought with him was made of a few metal bars with a metal plate on top. It was simple and crude, but it looked sturdy. Sargeras brought it here to eat, so it should be able to withstand heat. Meg wasn't worried that Sargeras would burn the floor and the walls. He was on fire this morning, but he didn't leave a single mark on the floor. It seemed the system had put a lot of effort into the restaurant's materials. The floor of this restaurant is made of rocks from the bottom of Mount St. Donia, the holy land of lava demons on the Demon Islands, the system said proudly. It's highly heat-resistant. The walls are made of hard synthetic soundproofing materials, and the surface is coated with the same material. It's also highly heat-resistant. "Can it withstand a giant dragon's attack?" Meg asked, raising his eyebrows. The system fell into silence. After a while, it replied, The restaurant's design is only designed to deal with normal situations. Please don't provoke the dragon. In this world, isn't it normal to encounter giant dragons? System, your design ability still needs to be improved. Meg sighed with some pity. Although he didn't expect much, if the restaurant's defense was really amazing, then he could use the restaurant as a fortress. Host, please do not question the system's design ability. The host's current authority is too low to upgrade the restaurant. The current restaurant is already at level 0. The system's solemn voice sounded. There are levels? How do I level up? Are you here for a quest? Meg's eyes lit up. If the restaurant could be upgraded, it would be interesting. If it could grow, it might really become an indestructible fortress. If the host spends 50,000 gold coins in addition to the purchase of food ingredients, the host will be automatically upgraded to LVL1, the system's voice sounded. You win. Meg was stunned. He had thought that he might need to complete some quests, but he didn't expect that he would need to spend money and 50,000 gold coins to upgrade. How greedy! After upgrading to LVL1, in addition to the free upgrade of the restaurant, many functions will be unlocked. Work hard, host. The system encouraged. I don't have money. Meg curled his lips. He was still trying to save the 10,000 gold coins to buy the strength points, and he didn't need to worry about the 50,000 gold coins in the short term. Anyway, he was quite satisfied with the current restaurant, so he wasn't in a hurry to upgrade it. Meg began to serve the dishes in the order they entered the restaurant. The 16 Ruggiamos in the oven were almost done, so the customers who ordered Ruggiamos first could eat first. When the second batch of Ruggiamos was in the oven, he began to cook Yangzhou fried rice for the customers who ordered it. In the past 2 days, customers had started to line up in advance, so Mabai couldn't get to the front of the line. Although he was just next door, he had to forge weapons every day. So he came soon after the restaurant opened and ordered 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice. Little girl, how about I take you to eat something delicious? Crassus looked at Amy with a smile, ready to tempt her with delicious food. Okay. Amy's eyes lit up, but then she shook her head and said, but I'm already full. How about tomorrow? If you take me to eat, you should pay, right? Of course, I'll pay. As long as it's something you like, anything is fine. Crassus's smile became even brighter. Sure enough, this little girl was a little foodie. She took the bait easily. As long as the two of them were alone, it wouldn't be difficult to check her magic talent. He could even lure her back to the Magus Tower with food. Mabai, who was sitting next to them, glanced at Crassus with narrowed eyes. He looked at Meg, who was busy cooking in the kitchen. It seemed that he had to remind Meg later. Okay, then I'll wait for you to come to eat tomorrow morning. Then you can give me the money for my share of the food. I love eating father's food the most. It's also the best. Amy nodded happily, her smile full of sincerity. Crassus, who was going to praise the delicious food in Rodu and make Amy yearn for it, froze. He felt as if he had stepped into a hole he had dug himself. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that it made sense. Not to mention Chaos City, even in Rodu, he hadn't found any food that could make him eat 2 bowls of it for many years. But Meg's Yangzhou fried rice made him want to eat 2 bowls of it for every meal. Telling the daughter of the owner of such a restaurant that he would take her to eat delicious food was indeed a bit thoughtless. Now that he had fallen into a pit and jumped into it happily, he could only nod helplessly and say, Okay, then I'll come over tomorrow to pay for you. You're so nice, Grandpa Whitebeard. Amy nodded. It felt so good to eat in her own home and have someone pay for her. Mabai was also stunned and almost laughed out loud. He glanced at Amy and felt that his worry was completely unnecessary. This girl was not someone who could be tricked by ordinary people. All of the customers waiting for their food to be served were also looking at Amy with great interest. This half-elf little girl was so adorable, and her words were also very interesting. Even though she could often make people choke on their words, it was still a source of amusement for the onlookers during their meals. Chapter 85. The 5 snow-white figures waved their hands and danced in a small circle on the table as if they were dancing around a bonfire. They attracted everyone's attention immediately. To normal people, this scene was naturally very magical. The reason why humans were able to occupy a place on the continent was not only because of the brave knights, but also because of the powerful mages. During the racial wars of the past, they often turned the tide of the war. After the war, the royal family of the Roth Empire promoted the magic casters to a higher position. They set up a Magus Tower and conferred the powerful magic casters as worshippers. They had a transcendent status in the empire. Therefore, humans were very respectful of magic casters. Although Chaos City was not under the jurisdiction of the Roth Empire, the status of humans in Chaos City was maintained by the Roth Empire's powerful backing. Now that they saw Crassus in a Magus robe performing magic, the customers were more or less respectful. They couldn't help but look at Amy. Even they found such a magical spell interesting. A girl of Amy's age would definitely like it more. But, can your little snowman sing? Amy asked with a shrug as she looked at the little snowman dancing on the table. She didn't look very curious. Ugly Duckling also peeked its head out to take a look before withdrawing its head back in displeasure. Its little eyes were filled with disdain. Sing sing? Crassus was taken aback. He looked at the little snowman dancing in front of him. It was no problem for him to do some difficult movements, but singing was a little difficult for him. After all, he was beaten by his master several times because he couldn't recite magic spells properly. He shook his head with a smile and said, "Little girl, it's impossible for a snowman created by magic to sing." The customers were also a little surprised when they heard that. They didn't expect a dancing snowman to not satisfy Amy. Wasn't it a little too much to ask for a singing request? Even that old magic caster said that a snowman created by magic couldn't sing. But, my snowman can sing, and yours is too ugly. Amy shook her head as she looked at the little snowman in front of Crassus with disdain. A snowman that can sing and dance? That's impossible. It doesn't exist. Crassus shook his head, not believing Amy's words. The guests also had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Unless it was a race of little people that had never appeared on the continent, how could there be little people that could sing and dance? In the kitchen, the corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. He was quite satisfied with the effect of his anti-cheating education in the afternoon. Now that he saw his girl preparing to show off her new toy, he felt even more amused. "All right, since you don't believe me, I'll have to show you. Father turned me into a little person who can sing," Amy said helplessly. She bent down to take the music box out of the cabinet and gently placed it on the counter. Everyone looked over curiously. When their eyes fell on the music box, their eyes lit up. So beautiful. A girl sitting not far from the counter couldn't help but exclaim softly with her mouth slightly agape. The exquisite wooden box was covered with a spherical transparent crystal, and inside the crystal was a beautiful fairy holding a small musical instrument. It was so exquisite and beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off it. Wow! The other customers had similar expressions. Although it wasn't a shiny object, just the hemispherical transparent crystal cover without any impurities was enough to amaze them. And Meg had actually turned it into an exquisite toy for Amy to play with. This level of pampering was probably limited by something that limited their imagination. Looking at the dancing snowmen in front of Crassus, they looked a little shabby compared to the fairy wearing a purple dress in the crystal. Their originally cute dance became a little comical. "This isn't conjured at all," Crassus confirmed in his heart after taking a look at the music box. There wasn't the slightest magical wave on it. It seemed that Mr. Mac had deliberately lied to Amy, but he didn't expose him. Meg's behavior didn't make him feel disgusted. It wasn't easy for a man to raise a little girl alone. But can it really sing? Crassus was a little doubtful. Since there wasn't even any magical wave, the little fairy who was obviously a puppet couldn't dance, let alone sing. The customers also looked at it curiously. The appearance of this thing was stunning, but Amy had just said that her little fairy could sing. They didn't know if it was true or not. Sing? Of course it can. Amy pressed the switch on the side of the music box. Little girl picking mushrooms. The edge of the music box lit up, and a pleasant singing voice sounded. The fairy girl inside also started to move. She played the musical instrument in her hand and spun in circles. It looked very lively, as if she was really a little fairy. How is this possible? Crassus stared at the singing little fairy with wide eyes. Although he could feel a slight wave of energy, it definitely wasn't magic. If it wasn't magic, how could this little puppet sing and dance? Moreover, he had just denied it 3 times in a row. Now, not only could Amy's little fairy sing, but it was also singing very well. Her voice was ethereal, just like a real fairy singing cheerfully. His expression suddenly became a little awkward. After living for so long, he didn't express his opinions much after he turned 100 years old. He didn't expect to suffer such a big setback in the hands of a little girl today. If it weren't for the fact that his face was thicker due to his age, he probably would have taken off his magician robe and found a hole to hide in. It was so embarrassing. He slowly lowered his eyes. He wanted this episode to pass peacefully. The customers wouldn't embarrass an old man like him too much, right? It can really sing, and it sings very well. But is this a children's song? Why haven't I heard it before? The girl next to him listened to the song. She was a little surprised, but also a little puzzled. The song was ethereal and beautiful, and the lyrics taught children to be hardworking and willing to share. It should be the kind of children's song that was easily passed down, but she had never heard it before. It was really strange. Amy reached out to turn off the music and looked at Crassus seriously. Look, Grandpa Whitebeard, the mushroom fairy can sing and dance. Isn't your little snowman not fun at all? The customers listened to Amy's words and looked at Crassus with strange expressions. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.